out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The West unites behind Britain in sending tanks to Ukraine as Russia warns of a new level of confrontation.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 26th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Western countries united behind the UK last night as Germany and the US now agreed to send dozens of tanks to Ukraine. And in a late-night address, the Ukrainian President Zelensky called it an historic day.
A new GB News People's poll suggests the Conservatives are lagging behind Labour when it comes about who you trust to run the economy. And voters don't have confidence that the government will level up the country. We'll break down the figures.
And GB News can exclusively reveal plainclothes members of the military are patrolling the Kent coast to intercept small migrant boats that make it past Border Force patrols. We're going to get the latest from our Home and Security Editor, Mark White.
And it's all very well adopting healthy habits for the new year, but what happens when our resolutions turn toxic? We'll be speaking to a personal trainer about managing our physical and mental health.
Dry January, anybody?
Yeah. Well, you've been quite successful.
Trying to be.
He's done very well.
I have dry January. I'm bored with it though. How much longer does this month go on?
Well, yeah. Do you want to know how long my efforts lasted?
Go on.
About 10 hours on the 1st of January. And I was in the pub with a gin in my hand.
Right.
So not very good.
Hope it was a large one.
It was.
Now, don't forget you can get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
To our top story now, and Germany and the US have followed Britain's lead in committing to send tanks to Ukraine.
The Ukrainian President Zelensky hailed it as an historic day, and it follows, of course, weeks of international pressure on Germany in particular to commit to the move.
Well, last night, on a call with the leaders of the US, Germany, France and Italy, Rishi Sunak urged Western countries to give more support to Ukraine and push for an end to the war. Well, here for more on this is Defence Editor of the Evening Standard and friend of the programme, Robert Fox. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us so early.
Yeah.
This is a significant moment, isn't it, as Ukraine heads towards that one-year anniversary of the invasion?
Yes, we've had a lot of significant moments, though, too, and it's not all over. I think it's going to be very difficult to bring the war to an end this year, but it's going to take a long time. It's very important putting armour in, but you've got to build round that package, and there is another shoe that must drop quite soon, which is air and air support. They've been either very successful by skill, but I think as much by luck, in neutralising largely the Russian Air Force up to now. That may not be able to go on forever.
How significant is it that Germany, in particular, has agreed to send these tanks, and it's allowing countries like Poland that have bought its tanks to deploy them to Ukraine?
Vital, absolutely vital, because both the British and the American tanks are very good in their different way, and they both share this magic Chobham armour, which was developed in Britain. But the Leopard, this force of Leopards, which the Germans were holding up on because they hold the export licence, they are German-made, is absolutely gives you critical mass. Because, OK, you're getting a dozen or 14 German tanks going in, but roughly the same number from Poland. Estonia is even considering sending, certainly the Finns, the Danes, the Dutch, the Spanish. So you're going to get a force of up to 60 Leopard 2 tanks. You can support them. That's where the main effort will be. With the not insignificant British squadron and the 31 from the US, you have got, sorry to give you the jargon, you've got roughly 2 divisions, because it's not just the tanks. It's the Bradleys, it's the armoured infantry, fighting vehicles like that, and the air cover. But the air cover at the moment is largely rockets and rocket artillery. They're going to need a bit more in the package if they're going to be able to go seriously on the offensive.
I mean, Zelensky's been talking about long-range missiles. How likely do you think that is, that could happen?
I think that's the next one.
Do you?
There's a thing called the ATACMS, which can be actually ground-launched or launched from aircraft. They need that to really get at the Russian forces, sorry to use jargon again, in depth. Now, what has happened up to now, why Germany has been, should I say, quite squeamish about this. You've had this thing, you're going to escalate, you're going to be able to attack Russia and Russian forces inside Russia. Well, a lot of the missiles coming into Ukraine are coming from Russia. I'm not saying that is justified. What you've also got to watch is the major offensive underway from Russia now is the information war, the diplomacy war, the information diplomacy, the fake news, the propaganda, the influence operations, and where it's really counting and they're gaining is in the Gulf, in Africa, North and South. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister's very successful visit to South Africa, persuading South Africa. There is, outside Europe and North America, not much enthusiasm for the war in Ukraine, because some of them are saying, we've got big wars on our doorsteps, why aren't you doing anything about it? Well, you can't do everything everywhere. But I do think that the German commitment shows that they will go forward now, and Russia is going to find it difficult to turn on the peace tap.
How close can these tanks get, actually, to be useful? I mean, because they've got to get near enough to be able to bombard the Russian lines. How near can they get?
Well, they're different from artillery, as you rightly say, because they're what's called direct fire.
Yeah.
The gun fires directly. Actually, you need a big tank, like the ones mentioned. There's one more. The French may even send their Leclerc, which is the eye-wateringly sophisticated, but it is a very good tank. You use a tank to kill a tank.
Yeah.
There are other ways of killing tanks, rockets, attack helicopters, but that probably would be a step too far. But I think that what they've got to do is not only get the tanks in there, but to get the Ukrainian army to use them to the maximum. They've been very good at sort of almost, Davy Crockett tactics, you know, Little Alamos, and be very, very brave. But it's not quite the full deal of a modern, sophisticated army that can go there and go there. There's been a lot of shrewdness and a lot of really having a low hand and making it absolutely perform to the maximum. But they need, with modern tanks, modern tactics, and modern, it's called schemes of manoeuvre. That is how I'm going to win this chess game.
If you don't think we're going to see an end of the war by the end of this year, where do you think we're going? Where do you think we're going to be by the end of 2023?
I think that we will get soggy truces and ceasefires, because that's the pattern of what we've seen before in Georgia, 2008. Georgia's still live. There are still places where actually it is not all good for Russia. Russia is going all out to make this war work. Putin is now, it sounds daft to say this now, Putin is now defined by being a military dictator. So He stands or falls, he wins or loses by military success. And that's where they're going to stick, the Russians. They will try and get a peace. They've come up with their peace terms again. It's same old, same old. They want a sovereign nation to say, I will never join this club or that club, principally the clubs being the EU, and NATO. Well, that means you're giving away your sovereignty. And this is the contradiction. But there is also, will be pressures, pushes and pulls in NATO and the EU, because we're now getting a very distinct club in the East, where two of the critical nations are the Poles, of course, who see if Ukraine goes down in whatever way, we're next. You obviously get the three Baltic countries. Finland is very important, and Romania has become very important, because Romania, and you'll hear a lot more of this, by the way, over grain export. Romania does not want to see the Black Sea turned into either a Russian or a Turkish lake, or just shared between them. And the other thing you're going to hear from this year, where Putin is going to say, when he does it, now you see me, now you don't, lead with the left, hook with the right, there's going to be trouble, I think, in the high Arctic as the ice melts there and the passageway goes through. And that's what the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Dutch even, and the Finns are warning us about.
OK, Robert
Fascinating,
Fox,
Robert.
thank you very much. And you're back with us next hour, aren't you? I believe?
I am indeed.
Yes,
yeah.
wonderful. Getting our money's worth. Brilliant. Well, it's 6:10 now. Let's have a look at the People's Poll. And let's take a look at what the poll is saying this week.
Well, the Conservatives are still lagging far behind on the economy, with only 16% of people saying a Tory government will better manage the UK's finances. Double that amount believe Labour would do a better job.
When asked about who they would vote for in the next general election, 50% said Labour, just 21% said Conservative.
And on levelling up, which is the great mantra of the government, of course, only 6 in 10 people in the poll say they are not confident at all that the government would deliver on their promises.
When asked about their thoughts on Rishi Sunak, 23% said they are either very favourable or favourable to the Prime Minister, while 48% said they felt somewhat or very unfavourable towards him.
Well, joining us now is the Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers. Good morning, Fraser.
Good morning.
In a nutshell, he's not cutting it, is he, Rishi Sunak?
Absolutely not. I think that's what these polls show. I don't think it's because Keir Starmer is a dynamic figure who has captured the imagination of the public that he's, on 50% in the polls. It's entirely down to the failures of Rishi Sunak and the collapse of the Tories more broadly. I mean, people are looking out and they're seeing the cost of living crisis is ongoing. They're seeing, huge NHS waiting times. I mean, it's no wonder people are turning against the government. And they see in Rishi Sunak someone who doesn't really have a vision or a plan to turn things around.
Potentially catastrophic for the Tories to lose their reputation as the custodians of the economy. That's always been their selling point. They're the ones who can look after the economy best. Labour miles ahead now of the Tories and who you trust to best run the economy.
Labour are now ahead on two of the key indicators, the economy and leadership. And usually those are the two things that, people go into a general election. That's what they're thinking about in the voting booth. So, yeah, that is catastrophic. But, who could be surprised given the period we're in, with inflation still hovering around 10, 11%. We're in a period of extraordinary crisis. And Rishi Sunak doesn't have a plan for growth either. That's the other thing. We're sort of hovering around recession. But where's the vision to get us out of this? Where's the drive? We should be seeing every day, on the front page, new initiatives to get us out of this hole. That's just completely missing.
And meanwhile, you've got Labour talking a lot about policy at the moment. And do you think that's the issue, Fraser? Is it you literally can't put a cigarette paper, it seems, between Labour policy and Conservative policy at the moment? Is that why voters are perhaps thinking, we'll vote Labour, 50%, according to this poll? Yeah,
I don't think people could name a single major policy difference between the two parties at the moment. And in fact, I saw a Redfield-Winston poll last night, one of those word association type things, and people were asked, what policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer? The answer was, don't know.
That's pretty devastating, actually. After 3 years as leader of the opposition, people haven't got a clue what he stands for either.
And how many times has he done one of these big vision speeches where he sets out his priorities? He did one just in the new year, and people haven't taken anything away from that.
I guess if they sorted out Rwanda, the Rwanda policy, the small boats, that's clear blue water between the Conservatives and Labour, but the policy's not going anywhere. They still haven't got a single plane off the runway.
Yeah, that particular policy is not going anywhere. And how many times have we heard from different Home Secretaries, different Prime Ministers now, because this issue has been running for years. We're going to fix this this time. We've done a new deal with France. We've got a new law that's going to finally stop it. And, you know, nothing ever really changes. So there's been some improvement in public perception of the border, but it's still 49% of people who think that Britain doesn't have control of its borders, and who can blame them for thinking that? That's obviously the case.
That is up, though, Fraser. So what do you think that is? So 28% completely... I've got that completely wrong. Completely agree that we've lost control. That's not correct. But it is up on previous figures. So would you say that's down to the Braverman effect? Because there has been some tough talk from her, hasn't there, in recent weeks?
There has been, but I think there was tough talk from Priti Patel as well. There's tough talk from Boris, you know, last year. So I think what that really is more to do with is that some of the worst headlines, you know, cast your mind back to sort of December last year, and we're hearing about overcrowding in migration camps. There were the tragedies of people dying. You know, some of those worst headlines are now sort of in the rearview mirror. But this issue has the potential to, you know, come right back to the top of the front pages at any time.
Well, so
because it simply hasn't been resolved.
Brexit was about getting control of our borders. We can't even stop these wretched boats coming across from France. Today, the Tories are having an away day at Chequers. So all the cabinet meet, political storms, coming up with political ideas for the next general election. They're being told by their strategists there is a narrow route through to victory. But it occurs to me that the person presumably leading on this will be the Conservative Party chairman, Nadeem Zahawi. That's his job, running the next general election campaign. And yet he's a dead man walking.
I think he probably is a dead man walking. You know, there is a bit of a sort of stench around this tax scandal. But I mean, he's becoming a liability for the party at the moment. But the reason he is, and the reason this issue is allowed to take up so much space, is because Rishi Sunak is not offering any kind of leadership. He doesn't even have control over his own party, let alone any ideas or vision to take things forward. You know, often these scandals become kind of outsized when politicians generally don't have a grip, if that makes sense.
OK, Fraser, thank you so much.
Thanks
You're with us in the next hour, I believe, as well. Yeah. OK, let's bring you up to date with other stories that are going on today. And the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust could be facing £15 million worth of cuts next year after receiving its draft budget. Ambulance workers in Wales have been striking over pay and conditions, saying the current situation is hitting staff numbers, increasing delays and killing patients.
And a 61-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assaulting the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, on the London Underground. British Transport Police say they received a report a man had been harassed at Westminster Tube Station yesterday morning. It's to believe the MP, who was, of course, a star, an unlikely star of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, wasn't hurt in the incident.
UK car production fell to its lowest levels since 1956 last year. That's according to new figures. The Society of Motor Manufacturers says it's due to the supply chain disruption and a large number of factory closures.
And nearly 1 in 4 university students are now less likely to finish their degree because of the ongoing cost of living crisis. A survey by Sutton Trust found 63% of students are spending less on food and essentials, and over a quarter say they've skipped meals to save on food costs.
Well, let's stay on that story now because we're joined by Senior Research and Policy Manager at the Sutton Trust, Dr. Rebecca Montacute. Good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for your company this morning. So run us through this survey then, because the findings of it are quite distressing, really. 1 in 4 students skipping meals because they simply can't afford to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. So we surveyed just over 1,000 students across the UK to try to understand better how they're being impacted by the cost of living crisis at the moment. And as you say, some of the findings are really shocking. So just around 60% of them are actually cutting down on kind of food and essentials generally. And as you say, 28% are saying that they're actually skipping meals to be able to kind of make ends meet. And that figure is higher. It's 33% for students who are from working class families who are less able to go to their parents and be able to get financial support there. So we're really concerned about kind of the amount of money that students have for day-to-day living, how that's impacting their quality of life, as well as those kind of shocking issues around the amount of food that they're eating. There are also issues in how they're able to engage with their course. So fewer of them are kind of doing student societies. People are either reducing how much they're doing that or dropping out of them completely. They're not buying kind of course materials or equipment that they need for their course. So yeah, really concerning findings.
Story in some of the papers this morning, I'm sure you've seen it, about how a lot of students have been hit by sharp increases in their rent, sometimes as much as 20%, which can amount to £1,000. That's another big blow for the students if they're already struggling to pay their food costs.
Yeah, absolutely. As with all of us, you know, costs are going up for students everywhere. And the kind of classic thing for students of, you know, living off of beans on toast, having quite a low budget, means that because they're living so close to kind of a minimum to start with, they're really susceptible to any of these changes in costs, like food, rent going up. So it is, you know, they're kind of a particularly vulnerable group as these costs are rising, but they're just not getting enough support at the moment.
Yeah, and on that note, do you think that the maintenance loan should be increased to be somewhere in line with inflation? Because what seems quite obvious is that students will be receiving 10% real terms pay less than they did last year. It sounds a bit like the strike action that we're seeing at the moment, but students are having to manage now on 10% less than they would have done the year before.
Yeah, absolutely. So the government in England has very recently announced that it is going to raise maintenance next year by 2.8%. Now, that is tiny as a figure compared to the inflation that we're seeing at the moment. And for students to be expected to be able to just make up that difference, you know, some students will be able to rely on their families and be able to get funding that way, perhaps. But for many families, they'll be struggling themselves. And for those from kind of working class backgrounds where maybe going to university, they've been the first in their family to go there, those families are going to be less likely to be able to make up that shortfall themselves. And then that can really impact those students, their ability to carry on in their course. So yeah, the government absolutely is not doing enough at the moment in terms of how much it's saying that maintenance will go up. And we'd like to see a much higher figure than that. We'd like to see maintenance grants brought back. After they were abolished a few years ago, we'd like to see the return of grants as well. And we'd also like to see more money going into hardship funds. So the government has said they're going to put another 15 million into universities. But if you split that across deprived students across England, it only equates to about £67 per student. So it's absolutely welcome that they have put that funding in, but more is needed given the scale of the issues that are being seen by students at the moment.
And just on that, if a lot of students are dropping out, that could be future engineers, teachers, doctors, which could have a serious long-term effect on the country in a few years' time when we just don't have enough of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, having students who have had the opportunity to complete their course, well-trained, can go out into the economy, absolutely essential for economic growth, which is what we know the country needs in the long term. But if those students in the short term don't have the funding that they need day to day, some of them will end up not being able to complete their course. So we found about a quarter say that they're less likely to finish their course because of the cost of living crisis. It will take a little while to see exactly how many of them end up having to drop out. But, you know, we've got the warning signs of that right now, and it's really time that the government take action at this point, prevent that from happening to prevent that potential long-term economic damage.
Dr. Rebecca Montacute, really fascinating to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much.
And after the break, we're going to be taking a look at the growing calls for the government to support leaseholders who can't sell their homes because of ground rent. Very irritating ground rent. But first, the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. Well, the day ahead is looking largely dry. We will see plenty of sunny spells, but that means we'll see a frost returning tonight. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled. Weather fronts will try and move into the far northwest of the UK later on Friday, bringing some thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain here by the end of the day. This morning, though, a dry start for many, a frosty start in places. Best of the sunshine across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into Wales too. Thicker cloud as we move through the day across some eastern areas, perhaps 1 or 2 light showers. The winds coming from the north, generally lighter than they were on Wednesday, but still brisk down the east coast at times. But plenty of sunny spells will lift temperatures between 6 and 8 degrees, so around average for the time of year. So that will feel less cold across central southern England compared to the week so far. Into the evening time, generally stays dry for much of the UK. However, a few showers moving in off the North Sea could push their way inland as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies holding on across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some mist and fog developing here as temperatures drop below freezing, leading to a widespread frost. Across England and Wales, less cold, temperatures close to freezing, so a patchy frost to greet us into Friday morning. So dry start for many Friday morning, sunny spells across England and Wales, clear skies across Northern Ireland and Scotland, though there will be some dense mist and fog patches around to greet us. These should burn away to leave a largely dry day. In fact, most of the UK will see a dry day until later on when thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain, brisk winds move into the northwest. Here, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius. Elsewhere, still around average between 6 and 8 degrees. Over the next few days, it stays largely dry. We could see some weather fronts at times across the north and the west through the weekend, giving a little bit of light rain. But overall, temperatures generally around average for the time of year. I'll see you again soon.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome back. Still lots more to come on today's programme. At 6:45, are you running away from your problems? We're going to discuss how to stop your healthy habits turning toxic.
And at 7:45, as it's revealed, 1 in 10 users of TikTok have just joined.
Including yourself.
Exactly. Is over 50. Who are not elderly, contrary to what was written in the GB News script. We're going to meet a pair of so-called Twilight TikTokers who've racked up millions of views and followers on the social media site.
And you will be following in their footsteps.
I will now.
Sure. Remember, you can get in touch on all the usual ways. You can email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us at gbnews. Well, there are growing calls for the government to do more to support leaseholders who own property but not the land that the property is built on.
So new laws came into force last year banning ground rent for new builds, which was a win for millions of home buyers. But existing leaseholders are struggling in some cases to keep up payments on their old ground rents.
Yes, some of them say the new law has made remortgaging or selling their property on nearly impossible. Anna Riley has a story.
Growing numbers of people like Lou are being forced to sell their leasehold homes after increases in ground rent as well as service charges have made their properties unaffordable. Lou bought a flat in Yorkshire to rent out as his pension pot, but is now subsidising his tenant to live there.
The property price has dropped, so from buying it for $153,000, I'd be lucky to sell it for $105,000 now. I don't really want to sell, but you know, the challenges now are the costs, and they're going through the roof. And I'm retired. It started off at £250. It's now up at nearly £400 a year. Where we thought we were buying something we would own, first thing is we never own it. The other implication is if the ground rent outside London is over £250 a year, it is effectively treated like a rental, a short-hold tenancy agreement. We are tenants. You know, we're tenants, and we have the same rights as tenants, but effectively fewer rights because we're actually owning or think we own the property.
Just down the road, leaseholder Keith has taken on the upkeep for the communal garden in a bid to keep down maintenance costs and regrets buying his flat due to the excess charges.
We could have bought, say, a bungalow for the price that we paid for our flat, a freehold bungalow. So I think on reflection, we might have done that instead. The leasehold law, I think, is something out of antiquity. I don't think there's actually, in my personal opinion, a role for that now. I think if you buy something, you should own it.
The Leasehold Knowledge Partnership is secretariat of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Leasehold Reform, and the charity want the system to be abolished.
Rather than keep on trying to reform this flawed form of tenure, why don't we just stop making more of it? Other jurisdictions which are based on English law have taken one look at this bit of game-playing nonsense which has perpetuated power and money in the hands of landowners and dumped it. We need to do the same. Scotland doesn't have this nonsense, only England and Wales.
There's 4.5 million leasehold properties in England, and many of the owners, like Lou, are waiting for this form of property ownership to be made sustainable. Anna Riley, GB News, York.
It is a really big issue, isn't it,
It is.
ground rent?
Yeah.
I was looking at a flat the other day, and it was something like £600 a month ground rent.
That's outrageous.
And we've got a friend who's an estate agent, and he was just saying, well, you shouldn't buy that because you won't be able to sell it on, which is the point.
Yeah, I mean, I own a flat and I pay ground rent. Why do I pay ground rent? I own the freeholds. Why am I paying rent? Who to?
Well, what are you paying for?
I'm not quite sure.
Exactly.
The land in which the house was built, but it was built in 1848. I don't think they still need to be paying for that.
No.
It is a con.
I think that's probably paid off.
And leaseholders have a terrible time. It's so complicated. And let's not even start on the people watching this programme who've got the same cladding on their property that was on Grenfell Tower all those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, housing in this country is just very complex at the very, very least. But let us know what you think about that. Does ground rent need reform? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, after the break, we'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Candice Holdsworth, so stay with us.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's bring you up to date with this morning's front pages. The Mail, not alone on the front pages, is leading on the Western countries joining Britain in agreeing to send tanks to Ukraine at last.
And the Mirror reports on Zelensky's praise for the West's military support. He called it a historic day.
The Times focuses on ministers' plans to tighten drug laws by banning the sale and possession of laughing gas.
In The Guardian, we're told that Dominic Raab is facing a much broader bullying investigation than initially thought.
And the Metro leads with a revelation: we should expect 2 or 3 police officers a week to face criminal charges, staggering figure, as the Met confronts ongoing internal issues.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, alongside writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both. Thank you very much for your company. And Freddie, as we just heard there from Andrew, Ukraine on the front page of many of the newspapers, for the first time in a long time, it must be said. And we're going to be looking at the Mail, aren't we? The headline, "Finally the West unites to defend freedom."
Yeah, I think the Mail has gone with the most bold front page on it, but it's the second day in a row actually that we've had most of the papers covering on putting this story on their front page. The Mail is saying 2 days after Boris's "What the hell are we waiting for?" rallying cry in the Mail, within 48 hours the West had rallied. It was actually a very good piece, I thought. But when Boris really goes for it, he can still write great copy.
Did Boris lead the way?
No, I think that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but I think it certainly played a role, and you know, he is emerging as this sort of key figure between Ukraine and the Allies. But this is significant news. You know, the fact that America is worth 2 days of coverage, the fact that America is now committing quite a large number of tanks, 30-odd tanks, to this conflict is an escalation. And we need to be, while everybody sort of can get behind Ukraine, and that's great, we need to be sort of realistic about, you know, this is dramatic in terms of how Russia responds now.
Do you think politically there will be a sense of frustration in Downing Street that although Rishi Sunak was the first Western Prime Minister to order in the tanks and people are following suit, a lot of people think all this has happened now with the United States and Germany and 9 countries now sending tanks after Boris intervened? So does Boris get the credit rather than Rishi Sunak? And let's face it, Rishi Sunak is pretty out of credit at the moment.
I think there'll be certainly some irritation in Team Sunak if, as is happening here, Boris is seen to be getting the credit. Although I think really, you know, perhaps that's been overplayed a bit in some circles, that you know, Rishi and Sunak they are trying to undermine each other in all sorts of ways. I think on Ukraine, it's one thing where they are vaguely on the same page.
Candice, what do you make of this? The Western allies are showing a united front here. It has taken some time, though, hasn't it?
It has, and I agree with what Freddie says. This is an escalation. Maybe it's a necessary one. Maybe this is what Ukraine needs to turn the tide of the war. But I think that we need to be very careful, very calculated, very shrewd about how we manage this and how Russia responds. Obviously, Russia are going to respond with a lot of bluster. They're also going to talk about nuclear threats. This is going to make everyone stand back. And we have to judge how genuine a lot of that is, or if it's just them trying to use those sort of propaganda tactics to stop the West getting more involved.
Do you think, Candice, that there was a potential for fatigue about the Ukraine. The voters think, oh, it's gone away, and how much money is it costing us? And now this is, as Freddie says, a massive escalation. Do you think people are supporting it?
I think largely it shows that people are still supportive of Ukraine. It is true, it's one of those wars where at the beginning there was a lot of attention on it, and then as the fighting starts and the two sides starting getting dug in, then people start losing interest. And I think that's why Zelensky has always tried to put himself front and centre. He's always going to different countries, presenting to their parliament, trying to make the case, and so that people don't forget about Ukraine.
And what Boris Johnson was saying was, do not be afraid of escalation, because that's how we're going to get this war finished, and finished quickly.
Well, yes, there is something in that argument. I think another key point that a few people in the papers are making today is that this is a diplomatic victory so far. This is not a military victory. You're just saying you're going to send tanks. Firstly, there's the logistical part of how quickly can you get the tanks. Secondly, where are they going to be deployed? How effectively can the Ukrainians use them? On the military front, it hasn't been a great week. And in fact, on the Ukrainian front all round, it hasn't been a great week. Zelensky's had to fire some of his officials for corruption, which is a major scandal brewing. And in the south, the Russians are starting to make gains for the first time since July.
And, of course, Zelensky's already said, thank you very much, that's very kind of you. Now I want missiles.
Now I want more. They will always want more because they need more so badly. Exactly. I did think the Mail was good to put a picture of Zelensky on the cover, because we've had tanks on the covers quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's his birthday.
It's a very happy birthday for him. He's 45 yesterday.
Very happy birthday. Here's 237 tanks.
Yeah, look, he's
what
man
a great
of the,
present for him, yeah.
And he's Man of the Year, isn't he?
He seems to have won a lot of awards for Man of the Year.
Well, so he should. He's charismatic, and who would have thought he used to be a stand-up comedian?
I know.
Well, yeah.
He stood in a T-shirt on the streets of Kyiv. I mean, it's just incredible, really, isn't it? Candice, let's look at a really shocking story now in the Express. This really moved me this morning. A woman has died of hypothermia in the UK because she couldn't pay her bills. I mean, you can't believe you're saying that out loud, really, can you?
It's so right. It's shocking. It is a tragic story. It was an 87-year-old woman who was so scared about the cost of her heating bills, and she refused help from her relatives because she was so proud that she froze to death. She was admitted to hospital with hypothermia, and ambulance workers are saying this is becoming more common, where they actually take elderly people to hospital because they are so afraid that they will freeze in their homes. And I think that we need to pay real attention to this, because elderly people are very vulnerable to price rises and, of course, to the cold. And so I think any government support should really be laser-focused on them right now.
And, of course, it isn't, because the money people get back on their gas bills, Tony Blair gets the same money, the King gets the same money as this poor lady who died of 87. And we've just gone through an incredibly cold spell, and I don't think there's much sign of a let-up, which potentially is going to cause even more problems.
Yes, so just talking personally for a second, our heating broke down for about 2 days a week ago. Our house was an icebox. I cannot imagine what it would be like if that was your permanent state of affairs. I mean, that would just be unlivable. So, yes, we need to focus minds now. I mean, we went through this whole lockdown where we were protecting elderly people from the COVID virus, but now they're vulnerable to the cold. So we have to think very carefully now about how to keep their standard of living high, because these people have lived their whole lives contributing to this country. We need to give back to them.
It's devastating. It's someone's mum, someone's granny,
really
isn't it?
is.
And,
and as you say, there is this lingering threat of a sort of freakish cold snap in the next few days. I think the latest is that we might avoid it. But, I mean, if that happens, that you're going to see more of these horrible stories, because this is a real fear for people.
I just despair when I hear, well, we couldn't target the energy aid on people because it's too complicated. Why is it too complicated? Well, so why am I getting the same as somebody who's on benefit? It's just not fair.
Well, quite. I mean, and it's proved to be such an expensive scheme. You know, there's a lot of debate about how expensive it ended up being. It is already being very expensive. That's now clear. And yet it's not going towards the people that need it the most.
Like this poor lady.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting support. And I'm very stingy, so I haven't been. I've been
turning the heating on.
I've been letting my children freeze. Yeah, but I figure they're young. They can cope.
Yeah.
Toughen them up.
Are you sleeping with a bobble hat on? And
I'm sleeping with I did put a jumper on and some socks.
Bed?
Some socks 2 nights ago. Yeah.
How romantic for your wife.
Yeah. That's all. She doesn't care about that anymore.
It's an admission.
It's an awful story. Freddie, let's talk Brexit, shall we? This is in the Telegraph.
Yes. Well, so it's another businessman, chief businessman, the chief of Marks and Spencer, Archie Norman,
who's actually turning Marks and Spencer around.
He's doing a good job, isn't he? Yeah, because they had a real struggle before. But He's saying that this customs labelling system that the government wants to introduce, and it's for Northern Ireland with a view to the protocol. Northern Ireland, foodstuffs, other things will be labelled UK-wide or Northern Ireland. Oh. And according to businesses, for lots of complicated logistical reasons, this is a terrible idea, and it's going back in time. And in a time of what Archie Norman is saying is, in a time of high technology where consumers can download an app and order anything, we're going back to a very old-fashioned system of sorting produce. And this is a disaster, and it's having a bad effect on the economy. And this comes hot on the heels of what we talked about last week, Andrew, which is Jamie Dyson saying the government is stupid.
Another really successful businessman.
On the economy, yeah.
And then we had Rishi Sunak describing people who are supporting tax cuts now as idiots. Well, so that makes me an idiot.
Yes. Well, this is the great worry for the Tories. Is polls are still showing Labour with the lead on the economy.
Massive.
Which is disastrous for Tories. They cannot expect to win an election when they are behind on the economy. And Sunak made 3 of his 5 pledges about the economy.
Yeah.
Will he be able to deliver on them? And that's now becoming a big
one of the reasons the Tories got that landslide in 2019. Boris Johnson said, let's get Brexit done, a really catchy phrase. People backed him for it. They're not getting Brexit done. Do you think Brexit now could become a millstone around the Tories' neck at the next election?
Yes, absolutely. They will be judged on how they delivered Brexit and have they actually delivered those post-Brexit wins. And I think that question still needs to be answered. You have had some reforms in the finance sector, but those are obscure to most people. We need to be doing things that people understand and to be delivering clear benefits. And I think if business leaders are criticising the Conservatives over the economy, that's really bad for the Conservative brand. They've always been known as safe on the economy, and now maybe they're losing that reputation, which is really fatal for them.
Yeah, and the Chancellor's making a big speech on Friday, Jeremy Hunt, and he's going to talk about growth, and he's going to talk about getting rid of all these thousands of EU regulations. They keep talking about it. They've been in power since 2019. Why are they still on the statute book?
Well, quite. And it's interesting that Hunt is focusing on that and not what a lot of the Trussonomics disciples still are pushing for, which is tax cuts. Yeah. He will avoid that for the foreseeable. But how you get productivity and growth going, which is Britain's great disease, it's a major problem for us. How you get that going without tax cut, without stimulating the economy through tax cuts.
William Hague, the former Tory leader in the Times this week, referring to tax cut loons. So an idiot and a loon. Nice language, isn't it?
It's interesting that, isn't it? The extent to which the Tories hate their own supporters is quite interesting. Yeah.
Candice, we've got another Brexit story in The Guardian, but this time it's affecting farmers.
Yes, so this is the front page of The Guardian, and this is about a new subsidy that has been announced that will be replacing the Common Agricultural Subsidy, which was, the Common Agricultural, sorry, I've got that wrong, what's it called? Yes, it's replacing the Common Agricultural Policy.
It is, yeah.
So that is worth about £2.4 billion, and that's going to be really good for farmers now who are dealing with a lot of uncertainty around prices because of rising energy bills. They really need this clarity now on how much money they're going to be getting in. The big difference between this and the Common Agricultural Policy, though, is that was to do with acreage, whilst this is going to be about actions that farmers carry out in terms of environmental conservation. But it's still very useful that they're getting this money.
Yeah. I'm afraid that's time, Candice and Freddie, but you're back with us in the next hour.
Plenty more to come.
Lots to talk about,
lots more to look forward to. OK, let's bring you up to date with other stories that are going on today. And the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust could be facing £15 million worth of cuts next year after receiving its draft budget. Ambulance workers in Wales have been striking over pay and conditions, saying the current situation is hitting staff numbers, increasing delays and killing patients.
And a 61-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assaulting the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. This took place on the London Underground. British Transport Police say they received a report that a man had been harassed at Westminster Tube Station yesterday, but it's thought that Mr Hancock, who was, of course, the unlikely star of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, wasn't heard in the incident.
UK car production fell to its lowest level since 1956 last year. That's according to new figures. The Society of Motor Manufacturers says it's due to a supply chain disruption and a large number of factory closures.
And nearly 1 in 4 university students are less likely to finish their degree. That's because of the ongoing cost of living crisis. That's a survey by the Sutton Trust found 63% of students are spending less on food and essentials, and over a quarter say they've skipped meals altogether to save money.
Andrew, do you like exercise?
I do, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, and I'm quite good. I was a big gym bunny before COVID. Then I sort of went off gyms a bit after COVID, sweaty,
Had enough.
men on weights grunting and groaning and all the rest of it. So I now train outside. I live in North London. Hampstead Heath is a fantastic, miles and miles of green space. So I've got this exercise thing which you put over a dead branch of a tree and pull this way and pull that way. Rather good. So
That sounds good.
Yeah, and it's really I do it early in the morning, and I try and do it once a week.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Well,
Even if it rains.
Even if it rains?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're very good. You're better than me. I like to walk, and that's also a lockdown thing, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So I used to go to the gym, left my gym membership, obviously, during COVID, and now I just really enjoy walking and being outside and...
Do you check how many steps you're doing a day?
Yes, I'm obsessed with my step count, absolutely.
A minimum of 10,000.
Obsessed. Minimum, has to be. But that leads us very nicely on,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yeah.
to our next point, which is when does a healthy habit become an addiction, like me trying to get my 10,000 steps?
Well, someone who's well-versed in fitness, his personal trainer to the celebs, it's Josh Saltzman, who's here. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, guys. Good
How
morning.
are you?
Well,
Andrew.
you look pretty flipping fit. How many times a week do you train?
Well, I train, kind of less is more.
Okay.
And I'm slightly older than you, Andrew. I Googled all about
did you?
Yeah, so,
Right,
so,
okay.
So you got to watch it when you get to my age.
You don't look
No,
older.
no, well,
You're
but
pretty good.
The truth is, I think you both have your act together, and I like the fact that you go out to the park.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And you do things first thing in the morning, which is a good idea. But if you had to come here, you probably wouldn't do anything before you came here.
No.
So I think when it comes to exercise, I always think with my clients, and I always ask them, whether they're a professional athlete or an actor or they're a young person, where have they been? Where are they going to? And how's this exercise going to make their game better? So your game today, folks, is to present on GB News. And if you got up like 3 hours before you had to get up, so you go out and ran like 5 or 6 miles, you'd be sitting there going, twitching, and going, my leg is stiff,
Yeah.
I don't feel good. So you always have to get people ready for their game. And I think the bottom line is, it's easy to train hard, it's hard to train smart. And when it comes to running, and I ran marathons, and anybody that's been in the exercise business for over 40 years like I have, hold your hand up. Most of my injuries came from doing too much, too often, and too frequently. And the truth of the matter is that you don't get stronger when you train, you get stronger when you recover from training. And this idea of addiction, it actually comes from the Roman age, where somebody used to get sentenced for a crime, and the addiction was they would become a slave for someone. So in a sense, being an addict to something is a slave to something. So in a sense, if you're really healthy, you don't get sick, you don't get injured, and you have a lot of energy, and that way you will look your best. When you become addicted to exercise, you override injuries, you override pain, you get more frequency of illnesses and flus. And as a matter of fact, people that train too much and don't train at all are usually in the same health category.
How would you know if you were addicted?
Yeah, where's the line?
I think when you push yourself when you're feeling sick, when you have a chest infection, you should never train. If you have a slightly, nasal congestion, when you're in pain and, your knee is throbbing and you still feel you have to go out there. And I think it's the problem sometimes with social media too these days, because young people that I work with tend to look at, it's unrealistic to have a 28-inch waist and a 55-inch chest for a guy, or everybody can look like Pamela Anderson in Baywatch. It's just unrealistic. And when you work with a lot of people like I have, like Angelina Jolie's and the Kate Winslets and the Sir Kenneth Branaghs over the years, you peak them for a movie role, or Hugh Jackman. They're not like that all month long. They're like that for that.
Don't tell me
sequence.
that about Hugh Jackman. I see him on stage and thought he's so magnificent and fit. And
Andrew,
what a
you're
fine
right with
figure
you.
of a man.
He is like that most of the time.
I thought.
And I got to tell you something. He's one of the nicest people. He's a really nice guy. He's a really nice guy. But having said all that, so he's the exception to the rule.
Okay.
But if you look at you know, a lot of actors, they get in shape for this movie, and then next thing you know, you see them on a beach in People magazine, and they have a bit of a Milwaukee tumor, as we call it. That's a beer belly.
Well, talk of actors, look at Brendan Fraser, who's had this great comeback with a film called The Well.
Yes. It's very good, yes.
And he's had to big himself up to look obese, but I suspect he'd become overweight anyway, as opposed to that young Adonis that he was in those films about the mummy.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
George the Jungle.
Yeah,
the jungle.
I do.
So I think we have to have realistic goals. But I think back to exercise, it's interesting because running is one of those things that does cause an obsession. When I was 6 years old, my dad was a rabbi, and I lived in an Irish-Italian neighborhood, and I'm just almost 67 now, and I was a 10-stone 6-year-old, right? So,
what?
Yes, 10-stone 6-year-old, yeah. So I was America's first fat child, and I think that's a lot of the narrative from a lot of people that are in the fitness world. You know, you try to change that perspective of yourself, but once you start exercising, it becomes this thing where you can't stop. So when I started running, and I became quite good at wrestling, and I got stronger, but when I started running, I became obsessive with running. And even when I used to wrestle, I'd have to run 6 miles after wrestling practice. So you're overtraining. And what happens with runners as a rule, recreational athlete runners, not a Biba Bakilov type of people from Ethiopia that are biomechanically made for running, is that they tend to think that more is better, and they don't get their miles in. They get this fixation on things. Now, a little fixation is good, but when discipline becomes deprivation...
Ellie's got a fixation about walking.
Walking is good. Well, your steps are good because I think when you're sitting down a lot, Ellie, it's good to move. So a little bit of fixation is good.
But
when you cross that line, when you become a social pariah because, you know, your partner wants to go out for dinner and you got to walk.
But let me ask you just finally, do you practice what you preach, or are you fixated on training?
No, I actually... Andrew, I have to practice what I preach now. And I think that what do they say? The best choice is no choice. And because I work with my hands with people, you know, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but it took me a long time to figure it out. And I always say to people, get behind early so you have time to catch up, is that when you work with people with your hands that I do, that you will overtrain if you do too much exercise, and you'll get hurt. Your shoulder will hurt, your back will hurt. So I've had a number of injuries, so I've calmed down, and I train less than I've ever trained before, but I focus more on how I'm thinking,
wisely,
how I'm eating, and how I'm resting.
Looking pretty damn good on it for 67, isn't he?
Josh, it's been great to have you in the studio. We
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stay with us. Lots more to come after the break, including the latest on Western countries sending tanks to Ukraine.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to our latest broadcast. Well, the day ahead is looking largely dry. We will see plenty of sunny spells, but that means we'll see a frost returning tonight. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled. Weather fronts will try and move into the far northwest of the UK later on Friday, bringing some thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain here by the end of the day. This morning, though, a dry start for many, a frosty start in places. Best of the sunshine across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into Wales too. Thicker cloud as we move through the day across some eastern areas, perhaps 1 or 2 light showers. The winds coming from the north, generally lighter than they were on Wednesday, but still brisk down the east coast at times. But plenty of sunny spells will lift temperatures between 6 and 8 degrees, so around average for the time of year. So that will feel less cold across central southern England compared to the week so far. Into the evening time, generally stays dry for much of the UK. However, a few showers moving in off the North Sea could push their way inland as we head into the early hours. Clearest skies holding on across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some mist and fog developing here as temperatures drop below freezing, leading to a widespread frost. Across England and Wales, less cold, temperatures close to freezing, so patchy frost to greet us into Friday morning. So dry start for many Friday morning, sunny spells across England and Wales, clear skies across Northern Ireland and Scotland, though there will be some dense mist and fog patches around to greet us. These should burn away to leave a largely dry day. In fact, most of the UK will see a dry day until later on when thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain brisk winds move into the northwest. Here, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius. Elsewhere, still around average between 6 and 8 degrees. Over the next few days, it stays largely dry. We could see some weather fronts at times across the north and the west through the weekend, giving a little bit of light rain. But overall, temperatures generally around average for the time of year. I'll see you again soon.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The West unites behind Britain in sending tanks to Ukraine as Russia warns of a new level of confrontation.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Thursday, January the 26th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Andrew Pierce. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
Western countries united behind the UK last night as Germany and the US agree to send dozens of tanks to Ukraine. In a late-night address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a historic day.
And a new GB People's poll, bad news for the Tories. They're lagging way behind Labour when it comes to who do you trust to run the economy. We're going to break down those figures for you.
GB News can exclusively reveal that plainclothes members of the military are patrolling the Kent coast to intercept small migrant boats that may have made it past Border Force patrols. We'll get the latest from our Home Security editor.
And the over 50s, well, they're taking over TikTok. More about that, that's me. We're going to be speaking to a couple of older social media influencers who are racking up millions of views. I'm going to even give it a go myself.
Yeah, you want to stay tuned for that alone, I think, Andrew. We'll get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Lots of you are doing so this morning, so do keep them coming in. Do keep us company. We're talking about ground rent this morning. Some of them are very expensive. Angie says when people buy these properties, they know they have extra costs. Just because someone has made a bad investment does not mean the government should bail them out.
Yeah, and John says ground rent is just another way for big builders to have an income.
Bob says it's a total con. My father bought a retirement home. It was a huge mistake. The costs were extortionate. We lost £75,000 of the buying cost, and it took 3 years to sell after his death. It was a financial disaster. Barbara says this needs to be stopped.
Of course, the irony is new properties, there's no ground rent. People like me who've had property for a long time, I pay ground rent.
Well, there you go. And it's creating a two-tier system. Like you said, who's going to buy an older property now if you can get a new build with no ground rent? It's a point, isn't it? Keep them coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk. To our top story now, and Germany and the US have followed Britain's lead in committing to send tanks to Ukraine.
The Ukrainian President Zelensky has hailed it as an historic day, potentially a turning point, and it follows weeks of international pressure, especially on Berlin, to commit to the move.
Well, last night, on a call with the leaders of the US, Germany, France and Italy, Rishi Sunak urged Western countries to give more support to Ukraine and push for an end to the war. Well, here with more is the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Good morning to you, Robert. So, what took so long?
I think there was a lot of office politics. At the highest level, you could see Berlin and Washington manoeuvring behind each other. They didn't want to take the risk. They've got constituency problems, which will go on. And I don't think, it's awful rolling my eyes, saying, I don't think they were taking the war in Ukraine seriously enough. It's still on a knife edge. It still could go one way or the other in a total collapse. Look at the pressure that the Ukrainian population, as well as their forces, are under. And I think that they have been mesmerised since the Cold War by Russian bluster and propaganda, at which the Russians are extremely good, it must be said. We're hearing yet again, we've heard it in this studio, oh, this is an escalation. Well, it's escalation or bust. That's the argument that clinched it this time. If we don't do this, the whole thing could go down the Swanee, or up the Swanee, I never know which one it is, within a matter of months.
And what of the risk, Robert, of an escalation? Because the real fear of an escalation is that it becomes a conflict between NATO and Russia, which effectively then is World War III.
You will have nuclear blackmail. And
is that going to come from Russia?
No. You've got the nuclear blackmail already.
Yeah.
It's hidden in plain sight. Isn't it fascinating? That the nuclear blackmail is the Zaporizhia nuclear complex, which could go off. You could have another Chernobyl and much, much worse with a total meltdown. The Russians have been completely irresponsible in using it as a fortress to shoot out at civilians. This has been going on through the late summer from that complex. And when they initially went into Zaporizhia, they wanted to take it off-grid and bung it into the Russian grid. I think we've got to really understand what the game of mirrors is. Russia is in no position to expand the war against NATO in the short term because, and I know we revisit it, it's very difficult to be absolutely hard and fast. But the losses, the casualties have been...
How many casualties are there? Because we can't believe a word that comes out of the Kremlin. What do you estimate?
Well, it's who your sources are. Now, there's a very interesting source came up at the end of last week. The chief of the Norwegian Armed Forces. And remember, Norway is a neighbour of Russia in the hierarchy, and their intelligence is very good. And they have people assessing these things. General Kristofferson said that he thought it was about 180,000 killed and seriously wounded. 180,000 Russian military personnel taken out of the conflict. That is 1.5 times the force they invaded with a year ago. And Ukraine, it's about 100,000, by the way. Can I add that? Possibly including 30,000 civilians.
But he's got plenty more conscripts, I'm afraid, where they came from. Putin.
Yeah, but he's got to train them.
Yeah.
And he's got to keep them out. He's draining the population pool away from the parts that count. Hardly touched in Petersburg and the complex and Moscow. And it's once it gets there and they realise that they are in a war, and he's told the economy, the people, the directors of the economy, in industry, it's got to be directed on the predicate of the war in Ukraine, because it's now, according to Putin, a war of Russian survival. It's got to work. And it hasn't been too successful up to now, because the successes with the small gains by Russia has been done by throwing personnel, men, and it's probably almost exclusively men, into the meat grinder. We don't really know how many have been lost at Bakhmut and Soledar. But according to one estimate, 1/3 of the entire Wagner force, which we've heard about, have been killed there in the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, these are horrendous figures. And you could talk about the losses in World War II, and yes, they were tremendous and horrendous, particularly in Ukraine, where, by the way, the Soviet forces sustained probably, qualitatively, per unit of land gained and lost, the highest number of casualties. But this is the 21st century, and I don't think you can go on like this. I think Putin must know that he, too, is on borrowed time. Because, he's thrown everything at it by saying, unusually, the man who should be commanding the staff, taking charge of the recruiting, raising and mobilising, he said, no, we're going to expand our standing forces, including reserves, to 1.5 million. He could say that, but what the effect on the battlefield is going to be is quite questionable. But we're going to have the tank argument. We can see it already in the FT. There's going to be an argument, again, between the Allies about whether they're going to provide modern Western attack aircraft.
And that will be the next thing, won't it? OK, Robert Fox, got to leave it there.
Fascinating, Robert.
Thank you so much. Really fascinating stuff. Now, time has just gone 8 minutes past 7, and it's time now for the People's Poll.
Well, the Conservatives are lagging seriously behind on the economy, with only 16% of people saying a Tory government will better manage the UK's finances, while double that amount believe Labour would do a better job.
When asked about who they'd vote for in the next general election, 50% said Labour, just 21% said the Conservatives.
And on levelling up, which of course is the government's great mantra, 6 in 10 people in the polls say they are not confident at all the government's going to deliver on that election promise.
When asked about their thoughts on Rishi Sunak, 23% said they were either very favourable or favourable to the Prime Minister, while 48% said they felt somewhat or very unfavourable towards him. Well, joining us now is the Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers. Good morning to you, Fraser.
Good morning.
And let's start with the economy, because this is quite striking, isn't it? 16% think that Rishi Sunak would manage the economy better. 32%, almost double, well, double exactly, actually, for Keir Starmer. That is remarkable, isn't it, considering Rishi Sunak's 3 out of 5 pledges are on the economy. They're not going to win an election if they're not thought to have a handle on it.
Yeah, it's a pretty extraordinary turnaround, especially, you know, Rishi Sunak was Chancellor of the Exchequer during COVID. I personally don't think he did a great job during that, but I think the sort of wider public perception is that he stewarded us through that difficult period. But now the kind of economic problems are really coming home to roost. You know, people are seeing the cost of living rapidly increasing. They know that their wages are not keeping up with inflation. So I'm not surprised that people have decided that Rishi Sunak isn't up to it.
Highest tax burden for 70 years, and they're just about to increase corporation tax by 6%. Yet Jeremy Hunt, who is the Chancellor, in his leadership campaign last year said he cut it by 5 or 6%.
And what are people getting for those high taxes? They're certainly not getting an NHS where they can expect to even see a doctor, or where an ambulance might not even turn up. So, of course, yeah, people are thinking, well, the public finances are clearly not being managed properly. And Rishi Sunak doesn't really have much of a vision to get us out of it. He has his 5 people's pledges, as you say, they're kind of around the economy, but there isn't any vision or policy to really back those up, or to, you know, there's no meat to this.
I'm just looking at what he said on the steps of Downing Street when he became Prime Minister. This government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. The chairman of the Conservative Party, Nadeem Zahawi, who did not tell the Prime Minister he'd been, we keep saying a penalty, let's be honest, he was fined by the Treasury over his tax bill. If this government is all about integrity and professionalism, why is the Tory party chairman still in the cabinet?
Well, yeah, you could say that. I think if you're setting yourself up to fail if you say you're gonna be all about integrity. I know that sounds a bit cynical, but
you can be cynical here.
I think it's both. It's interesting. Both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have tried to play this integrity card. We're both going to be the cleaner of the two. Now, Rishi is struggling a lot more because he's having to deal with this Nadeem Zahawi issue. I mean, some people could say this is a sort of hangover from the kind of Boris period. But really, you know, if the only thing you have to offer is cleanliness, then you don't really have much to offer at all. That should be the bare minimum we expect from politicians. Don't be corrupt. Really, we want politicians who are true leaders with vision, with something to offer the country, with a means of getting us out of this crisis. And at the moment, we don't have that. We don't have that from Rishi. We don't have that from Keir. We have two people competing to be the nation's bank manager, essentially, or the chief bean counter. There's not really much substance to them. And it's interesting, you can see on one of the other polls, it asks people how certain are they to vote in a general election. Only 53% are certain to vote, 13% certainly will not vote. I think that's the other story that we have to look here. Is this going to be a high turnout election between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak? Probably not. I think people are not going to be inspired to turn up. A lot of people are going to stay at home rather than drift towards Labour.
Do you think there's a lot of people out there, I mean, it's what the poll would suggest, that just don't feel seen by either party? I mean, you can barely put a cigarette paper between Labour policy and Conservative policy at the moment. And perhaps people just feel like there isn't a party out there for them.
Absolutely. I think people are going to be, especially, if you think about the people who voted for Brexit, for instance, that was a kind of inspiring moment in British politics. There was a sense that we had the potential for national renewal, for a kind of more democratic way of doing politics, for involving people in more important decision-making. And now that seems to have completely dissipated. That kind of populist upswell has been put on ice, and instead we have two very managerial figures who are really just managing expectations. They have nothing inspiring to offer.
They won't be able to say get Brexit done at the next general election because I'm afraid they haven't.
No, that's right. People are asking, well, what are you going to change? I think both of them actually would like to keep us as aligned to the EU as possible. Because they just don't have the kind of vision or the appetite for the risk that, to take the decisions that might be necessary to get Britain on a better path.
And certainly that's what Keir Starmer would like, wouldn't it? It's whether they can hang on for 18 months.
Absolutely. He started off this the new year in his New Year speech talking about taking back control, and then within about a week he said he wanted closer alignment to the EU. Last week, even worse, he was at Davos at the World Economic Forum, and he was asked, which do you prefer, Davos or Westminster? And he said Davos.
Staggering. He'll regret that.
He will regret that, because he was saying that's where you can meet people, you can do deals. He prefers this kind of jamboree for the global elites to our sovereign parliament. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, Fraser Myers, got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Now let's bring you up to date. The Welsh Ambulance Service Trust is facing £15 million worth of cuts next year after receiving its draft budget. Ambulance workers in Wales have been striking over pay and conditions, saying the current situation is hitting staff numbers, increasing delays, and warning it's going to kill patients.
A 61-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assaulting the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock on the London Underground. British Transport Police say they received a report that a man had been harassed at Westminster Tube Station yesterday morning. It's believed the MP and the I'm a Celebrity star wasn't hurt in the incident.
And more bad news on the economy. UK car production fell to its lowest level since 1956 last year. That's according to figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers. It's all about supply chain disruption and some factory closures.
Well, GB News can exclusively reveal that plainclothes members of the military have been patrolling some of Kent's beaches on the lookout for small migrant boats that manage to make it past Border Force and Royal Navy patrols in the Channel.
Military rigid inflatables have also been patrolling the coastline as UK authorities step up their efforts to tackle the ongoing small boats crisis.
Well, it comes as almost 500 migrants were taken to Dover on Wednesday after taking advantage of a break in the weather to make the crossing. Hundreds more attempted to cross but failed to make it into UK waters. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this report.
Just before first light, the Border Force vessel Volunteer slipped into Dover Harbour. On board, around 100 people taken off two small migrant boats. During weeks of winter storms, there have been few in the way of weather windows where conditions are calm enough to allow small boats to cross. But the criminal gangs are patient, and after operating for the past 4 years, they're now expert at reading the wind and the tides. So on the few occasions the weather allows, the people smugglers launched their small boats en masse. By mid-morning, around 300 Channel migrants had been taken to Kent after they were picked up from half a dozen inflatables. The Prime Minister has vowed to make tackling the small boats crisis a top priority. The bad weather of late, meaning relatively low numbers arriving here, has certainly eased the pressure on the government. But as this latest surge shows, the moment weather conditions improve, the boats are back. As we filmed, military personnel left Dover Harbour in 2 rigid inflatables to patrol some of Kent's beaches, looking for any small boats that might have made it past the Border Force and Navy vessels out in the Channel. GB News has been told that other members of the military are now routinely patrolling some beaches on foot as well. Into the afternoon, the boats kept coming, just before the weather window closed again, with windy conditions now expected until the weekend. In just a matter of days, Border Force will once again take control of Channel migrant operations from the military, who've been coordinating these patrols since last April. But the pressure on the government is unlikely to ease just because the authorities are better at spotting and intercepting small boats. Stopping the trade in Channel migrants is the ultimate goal, but even the government admits that won't be a quick or simple job.
Well, Mark White joins us now live from Dover. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning.
Mark, great story, well done. But it occurs to me, it's all very well having plainclothes military on the Dover beach. Don't we need them on the beaches in France to stop them getting in the boats in the first place?
Well, I think that's the point. Yes, you can certainly improve the operations within the Channel and on this side of the Channel to better detect those boats that are out there, making sure that no one lands on the beaches and then skedaddles off into the countryside to meet up with whoever they're headed to meet up with. But actually tackling the number of boats coming across in the first instance takes an effort on the other side of the Channel. And they are trying to do that. To be fair, the National Crime Agency has improved its working cooperation with its law enforcement colleagues on the continent with a view to going after the people smuggling gangs. But Andrew, it's no easy or quick fix at all trying to infiltrate these gangs, trying to disrupt what are now very sophisticated operations. They've been operating these small boats now for more than 4 years. They have well-resourced supply lines. The boats are manufactured to order in China. They're shipped to Turkey, up to Germany and stored there before then being snuck across to France and to the northwestern France coastline, where they're assembled, of course, and then they run down to the beaches and into the water. And yes, they have their successes in disrupting these people smugglers, but for every gang they take down or member of a gang they take down, there are many more willing to take their place because it's such a highly lucrative trade. They're charging at least £3 a head. If you've got 50 people on one boat, on a good week they're making many millions of pounds. So trying to disrupt that model and deter people from entering what is a criminal trade that is highly lucrative is not easy.
Really difficult to break down that model. Mark, we are expecting milder weather this weekend and into next week as well. We're bound to see more boat crossings, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, the weather is very unpredictable. It's been the one sort of saving grace, I think, for the government, who, have had a tremendous pressure towards the back end of last year. But and we were expecting a really busy November. Last year, the year before I should say, November was the busiest month of the year. Well, last year it was pretty awful weather-wise, so not that many came across. The same in December and really for most of January as well. So it's eased some of the pressure, the immediate pressure of people being very angry at seeing hundreds and hundreds of people crossing. Yesterday, the weather cleared just a bit and allowed that surge that we see now anytime the weather improves. 450, we believe, roughly, in 9 small boats got across, but at least half a dozen other boats took to the water, didn't make it to UK waters, had to turn back with these very sort of less than powerful outboard motors they have and strong tides there, so often they're forced to turn back. A couple of boats were punctured on the beach by the French as well. So, you know, close to 1,000 were, as predicted, probably trying to get to the UK. About half that number, or just less, made it. We're expecting Saturday to be a reasonably good day, but the weather will close in again for at least another week.
It'll be one to watch. Mark, thank you so much. Another great scoop from you, and you've been across that for the last 2 days. Thank you so much.
And after the break, Paul Coyte will be here with all the big sports stories, none of which I'll understand, of course, including Marcus Rashford's super goal, apparently, that put Manchester United 1 foot into the Carabao Cup final.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this
you
morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind. And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome back. Still lots more to come on today's programme.
Great Britain has won its first ever bobsleigh gold medal at the European Championships. We're going to speak to a member of the team at 8:20.
And Geoffrey Moore, the son of Roger Moore, will share some memories of his late father and play us some of his new song honouring the James Bond legend.
I'm excited about that. Roger Moore was my favourite James Bond.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Yeah, and I met Roger Moore once and he was as charming as you'd have expected him to be.
And he was nice.
Lovely.
Isn't it good when idols kind of match up to what you think they're going to be like?
And don't forget you can join in all of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
Well, we're very happy to say that Paul Coit joins us now to discuss the latest and the biggest sports stories. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
How are you?
Roger Moore was lovely. I'd met him as well.
Yeah.
Whereas I played golf once at Wentworth, and you have a caddy, which was, for me, the caddy was much better than I could ever dream of. And was saying that Sean Connery used to play there. And he said that what the caddies used to do, they used to hide away because nobody wanted to caddy for Sean Connery.
That's disappointing.
Because he was a nightmare.
Was he really?
Oh, yeah, and it was always the caddy's fault. And so as soon as Sean Connery's walked in and said, "Right," I nearly did the voice for him.
I think you should.
That's
quite good.
I'd like a caddy, please. He probably wouldn't say, please. So then all the caddies would disappear, and there was none left until one of them would be chosen, and they'd have to go and do the round with Sean.
I interviewed Sean Connery when I worked at the Times. He was incredibly charming to me, actually.
Was he?
Yeah.
You want to try carrying his clubs?
But he didn't want to talk about James Bond.
OK.
So what else did I talk about? I mean, he did have a great career.
It's like going, well, Neil Armstrong, it's good to see you. I don't want to talk about the moon. I don't want to talk about the moon. I'll talk about anything else but that.
But you want to talk about Manchester United. Now, if Eamonn was here, he'd be dancing for joy, because I do know this.
Yes.
He's a Man U fan.
He is.
But can't anybody beat Nottingham Forest?
Well, not necessarily, because Nottingham Forest, they've done OK. They've got to where they are in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup.
But what league are they in?
They're in the Premier League.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
At the bottom, I know that much.
They are, that's right. And so it started off not so good.
Right.
Now things are looking better for them.
Okay.
So they've got to a good place in the Carabao Cup. But it wasn't so good last night because Manchester United beat them 3-0. Because Manchester United are looking so good.
Right. And Rashford's looking so good.
Marcus Rashford, of course. So Marcus Rashford looking for a new contract. It's expected that he'll be signing for Manchester United. So we're probably talking, I think, 300 grand a week. Wouldn't be bad, would it?
Wow.
Wouldn't be bad.
How would he ever manage?
I don't know. It
must be so difficult.
It must be so difficult. But anyway, 300. But at the moment, he's worth it to Manchester United because he's playing so well.
Is this like a little bit like Crufts, I'm imagining? So it's like
this
your time
is a link
to shine.
I've never heard before.
So
yes.
I'm just thinking, like, it's your time to shine. You've got to show people why they want you, why you should win.
You know what? It does happen a lot in football.
Yeah.
When they say they're obviously playing for the contract. We've seen players in the past, they come towards the end of their contract and all of a sudden it's like, where did this come from? And then they sign on, they get their new deal, and then it's like, OK, they've gone back to the other player again. So it does happen. Amazingly, it happens.
They should be performing heroics every minute they're on the pitch for that sort of money.
On that money.
Rashford, and it's made a difference. The new manager's come in and it has now inspired him. And he went, of course, all the charity work he'd been doing. And people were saying, you need to concentrate more on your job, more on your football. It's great what you're doing, but this is the reason the football's suffering. And he is doing that. And he is playing the best football in his career.
He did brilliantly on school meals, didn't he?
He really did.
He was brought up on free school meals.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's a great story. And the fact that he's now playing so well as well.
Yeah.
But I tell you, it's the golf. This is the really interesting one.
Is it really interesting?
Well, it is. Because it's... Andrew, shenanigans that are going on. There's shenanigans.
They'll interest me, the shenanigans.
I know
more
it
than
would.
golf.
It's shenanigans away from the actual golf course. Now, Live Golf, you're probably aware, Saudi-backed golf, and they're paying golfers millions and millions to join them, which is away from the PGA.
Right.
So there's a break. There's a breakaway. Now, Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, very firmly PGA. We don't like what's going on. You can throw as much money as you want at us. We are not going to leave. We're going to keep playing here. Now, there's another player called Patrick Reed. Now, Patrick Reed is another interesting character. He's been disliked, I think it's fair to say, quite a lot over the years. He's been accused of cheating. He's not the nicest guy from what we see when it comes to professional golfers. So he's gone straight over to Live Golf, and then he's got very litigious. So people that have said anything against him, or whether it be against golf, and he's throwing lawsuits left, right and centre. And one of them was to Rory McIlroy because of what he'd said about Live Golf. So anyway, they got to meet. Now, the Dubai Desert Classic is on at the moment, and they're allowed to be PGA golfers and Live golfers, so they're joining together in this tournament. So there's going to be a point where, because really none of them are getting on from either side, and Patrick Reed sees Rory McIlroy on the practice ground. Now, Patrick had actually subpoenaed Rory, and he got this on Christmas Eve. He's at home with his family and gets this subpoena, and so obviously he was very unhappy with him. So Patrick Reed, and there's actually I think we can have a look. We can probably see. There we are. This is what happens. This is Patrick Reed walking over there. Now Charlie Diamond is Rory McIlroy's caddy. Now, it all happens very quickly. See him just throw that. Ooh. Now, what he was trying was a tee, because he went over and shook hands with the caddy, because the caddy didn't see him. He said, oh, yeah, hi, how are you? And then he went up to Rory, and surprise, surprise, Rory doesn't really want to shake hands with this guy because of what he's done. So he looks the other way, and then Patrick Reed just throws a golf tee, and it's like a Live golf tee that he throws his way towards him. So Rory wasn't happy, and Patrick then calls Rory an immature little child. So there's your shenanigans going on at golf at the moment.
And who's the better golfer?
Oh, Rory McIlroy is. Rory McIlroy is the world number one. And
is he?
And he's had a fantastic year. He's won, bar one, every major. And he's come back into form. Patrick Reed, hit and miss, but it's gone to Live Golf for an absolute fortune. But then we've got to look at what happens further down the line is the Ryder Cup, where you've got Sergio Garcia, who's another great player, who was friends with Rory McIlroy. And he was asked about this and said, how's the relationship? And he went, no. Are you going to talk? No, there's nothing between them anymore. So should the Ryder Cup come and they both get picked, they may have to play alongside
and we could see similar scenes.
A little similar scenes in argy-bargy and teams being thrown left, right.
Which keeps us interested.
Yes, of course. Fascinated, actually, in golf. But who'd want to play in Saudi Arabia?
Well, they do. The thing is, it's Saudi Arabia backed. But you'd think with all the sand, it's like one big bunker. But it's actually, they actually tour around the world. So they play here, they play in the States. It's their own tour, which they're backing.
And I suspect they don't have a women's tour in Saudi Arabia.
That's a very good point.
There we are. See, I do know a little bit about
it.
Yes,
very good, Paul Coyte. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Always a joy, Paul.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
It's like sports school, isn't it? We're like, tell us. What?
Yeah.
You know what?
Tell us about the football.
Tennis, we'd have next time.
Djokovic is boring.
Yes.
Anyway, Paul, thank you very, very much. Now stay with us, because after the break, we'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Candice Holdsworth.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. Let's bring you up to date with some news and views from our GB listeners and viewers. The People's poll, Michael saying, I think if people stay at home and have no intention to vote, then they probably have no ground to complain about what government runs the country.
Very good point, isn't it? Yep. We're also talking about ground rent today. Eric says, I believe the abolition of ground rent for new build properties was the first of a two-part reform. The second is the abolition of ground rent for older properties. That's very interesting. That would probably be welcomed by many people.
Yeah, and of course lots of you are still furious about the Channel migrants, including me. Jason says we need a refund from France for the money we paid them, and we need to send these people away 100% every time. It's not going to happen, Jason.
And Les in Lincolnshire says, what's the point of beach patrols? All we do is pick them up and then bring them in here. We give them a free crossing.
Great, that's right. Now, we're going to bring you up to date with this morning's front pages. The Mail, that's my newspaper, is leading on Western countries joining Britain in sending tanks to Ukraine at last.
The Mirror reports on Zelensky's praise for the West's military support. He called it a historic day.
The Times is focusing on ministers' plans to tighten drug laws by banning the sale and possession of laughing gas.
In The Guardian, we're told that Dominic Raab is facing a much broader bullying investigation than initially thought.
And the Metro leads with a revelation: we should expect 2 or 3 police officers a week, that's a week, to face criminal charges as the Met's confronting these ongoing internal issues.
And it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, alongside writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Freddie, let's start with you, shall we? The Financial Times. We're talking support for Ukraine here, but this time the debate about sending jets.
Well, yes, I picked this story because we don't often do the FT on here, but it's worth focusing on because I think this is the next phase of the Ukrainian conversation is jets. And Lockheed Martin, which is America's biggest arms defence contractor, they are ramping up production of F-16s with a view to sending them to Ukraine. And I think that we'll have a sort of jet conversation, just like we had a tank conversation for the last few weeks, in the coming weeks. You may remember the Polish MiGs a while ago, and America actually intervened there and stopped Poland from sending MiGs. But the anticipation now is that the Biden administration is ramping up so much that they're now going to provide.
I was going to say, if Lockheed is ramping up, does that mean America may be in the lead on the jets, whereas Britain was in the lead on the tanks?
It certainly means they're expecting it, although the Biden policy has always been to be sort of leading from behind, as it were, so just coming in last, but with the full support. However, again, you've got to think, if we're now doing jets, there was all the fear about the no-fly zone. If we're providing air support, how close are we getting on to a full-scale open conflict with Russia?
Robert Fox from The Standard was telling us that he said they've got to have air cover.
Yes, well, they do. But
and the tanks we're sending in need air cover too.
I mean, got another debate. I asked Robert in the green room. I said, what about the training? And he said, they are being trained, but it's quite a serious thing to train someone who's used to Soviet-era aircraft to fly an F-16. That's a hell of a lot of training that needs to be done. I mean, can they get the pilots ready in time for when these F-16s will be ready?
Yeah, I think logistically it's actually quite complicated. I think it's going to take several months. I was listening to something this morning about the logistics of it all. It needs certain ammunition, a specific sort of training. I mean, it's going to take a long time to even get them into Poland, to then get them across to Ukraine. So
people love talking about kit. It's always quite fun to sort of read the stats on the kit, but the logistics, which is the boring part, is the problem.
Getting it seems like the easy part. Candice, let's go over to you, shall we? And this is laughing gas. It's something that caught our eye this morning, didn't it, Andrew? And banning it, potentially. This is in the Times.
Yeah, so this is front page of the Times. Apparently, ministers are looking at banning the recreational use of nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas. And people might have seen the canisters lying around after festivals or parties. It's also used in pain relief as well. Women use it during childbirth. I think this is part of the new crackdown on minor drug offences, or what has previously been perceived as minor drug offences. Chris Philps, the Minister for Policing and Crime, has come out and said that this is what they want to focus on, law and order. And apparently Suella Braverman also favours stricter policies on cannabis use. So this is what they're sort of driving forward for the next election.
I get it, Candice, that they want to sort this thing out about laughing gas, but I think people watching will think, actually, what I really want them to do is put a bobby on the beat and investigate burglaries and make the streets safe. We're hearing that the Metropolitan Police... You were at the briefing yesterday, I think, Charlotte. Sorry.
Ellie.
Who's Charlotte? Ellie. 2 or 3 police officers a week could be in court. Isn't this the sort of bread and butter issue the government should be dealing with?
Yes, these are huge issues, and it's everything people are talking about, safeguarding issues in public life. So for police officers, migrants coming in who haven't had proper background checks. There's another story that we're going to cover now with sex offenders in women's jails. I mean, these are the big issues, and we're seeing big failures in government departments to protect the public from this. So, yeah, laughing gas does seem rather trivial.
And apparently there's people with legitimate reasons can have an exemption, such as chefs who use it in whipped cream. Fascinating.
I like that Michael Gove is the minister quoted in the story, because, of course, he's known for cocaine use.
Is he?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
No, it's not. It's not low.
Right.
No. In the past, it's well behind him. That's all well established. I'm not saying that. I don't.
Yes,
don't
it came out
Michael.
during one of the leadership contests.
Yeah.
You're right.
But he's on this sort of the levelling up tour. Yeah. And he seems to be he's trying to make as much noise as he can about it, and he's obviously pushed this story because I think some people find those little canisters lying around everywhere upsetting.
Right.
Provincial towns.
Yeah.
OK, Freddie, let's stay with you, shall we? And Dominic Raab, it seems like his bullying investigation is going to be much wider than initially thought. That's in The Guardian.
I feel bullied by this story because it just goes on and on and on, and it never goes anywhere. And the thing on Raab is you talk to some people in government and they'll say he's tough, but he gets the job done, but he's a bit cantankerous, but he's not a bully. Other people say he's a horrible bully. Never quite get a sense of where these allegations are going, what's going to happen. There hasn't been much progress. I think the reason The Guardian are putting it on the front page is because the sort of Zahawi story has faded a little bit for now, and they want to keep up this sense of perma-crisis among the Tories, and that, sleaze, bullying, sex, tax.
And, of course, a lot of Labour MPs saying the more bullying allegations against the Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary, he should be stood back or suspended, but that's not going to happen. I'm told that Dominic Raab is an incredibly hard taskmaster. He's very intellectually demanding, but that's what I think we want, don't we, from our cabinet ministers?
I think you'd want that in a Justice Secretary as well. Yeah. I think this is the problem, is that in the civil service there is a slightly kind of again, I'm trying not to use the word woke, but a slightly woke culture creeping in where...
Why do you say only slight?
Well, sorry, okay, massive woke culture.
Yeah.
And people will take, being ticked off as bullying.
Yeah.
And you can't really run a department, particularly a department that needs quite serious work, like the Justice Department, without being quite tough.
But what is taking so long? You wouldn't think a bullying investigation would take very long. You just need to get the people in a room and find out what they say, and then you...
Yeah, this is what's so strange about it. I mean, Rob has hired this top barrister who's supposed to be the best in the business to help him get off it. But, I mean, it seems to me that I think among Sunak's lot, they've decided to move on from this, and I think that they're not planning to fire him.
No,
I don't think The Guardian are going to give up because they feel they can claim a scalp here. And Pippa Creer, who's the journalist who's done it, who's quite new at The Guardian still, but she has been the great scoop getter, the great kind of enemy of the Tories for a while. And she clearly thinks she's clearly got some sources. Yeah, she clearly thinks she's got some...
She did a lot of the breaches of the lockdown stories.
She was Miss Partygate,
yeah. She was, yeah.
Candice, let's look at the Telegraph, shall we now? And this is about lockdown.
Yes. So this is an article by Jonathan Sumption, the famous lawyer, who was a big critic of lockdown. And he's now written, I think, a very powerful article for the Telegraph about excess deaths and basically how they're being driven by health concerns that were neglected during lockdown. So most significantly, heart problems, cancer care, Alzheimer's. Those have risen hugely because cancer referrals dropped significantly. And people at the time, oncologists and cancer experts, said, listen, we're seeing a drop in cancer referrals. This is going to create problems later down the line. We also had people whose treatment was cancelled, and Jonathan Sumption said, a friend of his, her cancer treatment was cancelled. By the time it was resumed, it had spread too far, and she died.
Yeah, that's shocking.
It is really, really, really shocking, and we need to get to grips with this and to get a handle on it. And I think people need to admit their mistakes, that they neglected these very real health issues, and people were raising it at the time, and they weren't listened to.
And it's not going to get any better anytime too, Candice, because the waiting lists are getting bigger. These strikes are going to make waiting lists even worse, and some routine cancer appointments are going to be cancelled.
Yes. We are in the middle of a health crisis right now, and we need to see this addressed by government, and we need to see a proper plan to take care of it. People need to be able to trust that when they're ill, that they will get the treatment that they need, and that hasn't happened.
Freddie, what do you make of all of this?
I agree with everything Sumption says. I think he was sort of vilified a lot during the pandemic.
He was rather brave when he spoke out.
He was very brave, and he's meant to be the cleverest man in England.
Yes, he is.
And he really fought the fight, and he wrote some very powerful articles at the time saying this was a disaster. He's been vindicated. I will say, actually, although I agree with everything he said, my mother got cancer during the pandemic and was treated... No, she's in the clear now. She was treated brilliantly on the NHS. So it's not the whole system didn't completely collapse, and there are good stories, but obviously excess deaths are up massively. The largest, most obvious contributing factor is the lockdown, and people should be very angry about it.
Yeah, and you sense all the government are doing is fixating on the disputes.
The disputes and coping with the ongoing economic problems that we have, which are largely a result of lockdown.
OK. Freddie, Candice, thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, forget the Kardashians, you know them? 1 in 10 users of the social media app TikTok are now over the age of 50.
Yes, older influencers are racking up millions of followers and enjoying a lucrative retirement income to boot, with the highest earners bringing in hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. This could be you, Andrew.
Well, I have a confession to make. I've been put on TikTok today for the first time. I didn't do it myself, of course.
No, you had Tom, didn't you?
Tom did it for me because I wouldn't know where to start.
It was quite funny watching you, I must say.
And I was intrigued to read in the brief, elderly people are now doing TikTok. No, we're not elderly if we're over 50. We're not elderly if we're over 60, can I say? Dare I say, we're not elderly if we're over 70.
No.
Maybe if you're over 85.
Maybe.
But here to tell us about how to do it are those TikTok stars themselves, Jimmy and Joan O'Shaughnessy.
Oh, and I know you two from TikTok. I knew I'd know your faces. And then you came on, I was like, yes, I know you both. And you dance in your kitchen, don't you?
We dance everywhere in the house, yes.
Oh, amazing. So tell us then, take us right back to the very beginning. How did you get on TikTok? Because Andrew's joined this morning and he needed a little bit of help, didn't he?
A lot of help.
So what appealed to you about TikTok? What first got you on the platform?
Well, it was all new to us as well, actually. We hadn't heard of it until the first lockdown. And we used to go dancing every week, and all the dances stopped, of course, with lockdown. And I just heard of TikTok, and we had a look at it and thought, well, you know, maybe we could do some dances on there. And it was a way for us to keep our dancing going, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you thought...
What sort of dancing do you do?
Our dancers, I hadn't a clue what I was getting into. But,
what sort of dancing do you do?
3 years now, almost. We're still doing it.
Okay. And what sort of dancing do you do? Is it ballroom?
Well, that was what we did. We did do ballroom, but you know, we've sort of tried to pick up with all the current trends now on TikTok, and TikTok we do all sorts of dancing. We'll have a go at anything, won't we? Within reason.
Yeah.
And can we have a bit of behind the scenes from you both now? So do you two rehearse? I mean, do you have a little meeting before you do the TikToks about how you're going to do it? I mean, what goes on between the two of you before we see the TikTok?
Well, we do rehearse, yes, and quite often we do it on a day when you're going to play golf, don't we? So we have to practice the TikToks before Jimmy goes to golf. So we'll be practicing. He'll be looking at his watch, thinking, "I've got to go soon."
Yeah, I was late for golf yesterday. It was one we wanted us to do yesterday, and it's fun.
We do spend time practicing because we like to get it right, don't we?
And I think that's the key. You know, because we were in a formation team for 7 years, and so we had to go over and over and over until we got that right. Especially there was 8 couples in a team. You know, that was fun. So
we used to rehearsing and practicing.
Yeah.
And we work very well as a team.
Yeah, and who's watching you? And can I ask, do you have children and grandchildren? What do they think? Are they proud of you, or are they secretly watching from behind their hands?
They are proud of us. We have 2 sons and we've got a grandson, and they do watch us, and as I say, they're proud of us, but they don't really want to join in.
No, they don't. But they get more up to dates from their friends who seem to follow us more than our sons do.
Well, you two are really famous. Like I said, I knew your faces the second you came on the screen. You come up on my TikTok page all of the time. I have to definitely follow you after this. What is it that people love about you? What are you reading in the comments? What makes you two so special? Why are you going viral so much?
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with our age. People say, you know, will you be our grandparents, or will you adopt us, you know? And also the fact that, you know, because we've been together for so long, we've been married nearly 50 years, that people want to be like us. They say, you know, we hope we find a relationship like yours, and that sort of thing. Don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, that is so lovely.
But,
so it's like a wider thing. It's not just about dancing. It's about a relationship, and people want what you two have.
Well, exactly, yes.
I think there's a positivity that we try and sort of portray to people that, you know, you can have fun, you can enjoy it, but you can also send out, you know, real positive vibes to people, and we get some fantastic response from all around the world.
You know, people will say, "Oh, I've had a hard day at work," and then, you know, I've got a smile on my face when I opened up TikTok, and there you were. So it makes it all worthwhile when you hear things like that.
We just can't get our heads around the fact that there's 2.5 million people sort of around the world.
That's amazing. And honestly, don't we just need that joy in our lives right now? So Jimmy and Joan, really good to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for your company. You need to check them out on TikTok.
I'm going to now. I'm on TikTok.
And Andrew's going to join them. We should do a little dance like them.
I think we should.
Yes,
After the break, we're going to have the latest on the landmark movie by the West, Send Tanks to Ukraine.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to our latest broadcast. Well, the day ahead is looking largely dry. We will see plenty of sunny spells, but that means we'll see a frost returning tonight. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled. Weather fronts will try and move into the far northwest of the UK later on Friday, bringing some thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain here by the end of the day. This morning, though, a dry start for many, a frosty start in places. Best of the sunshine across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into Wales too. Thicker cloud as we move through the day across some eastern areas, perhaps 1 or 2 light showers. The winds coming from the north, generally lighter than they were on Wednesday, but still brisk down the east coast at times. But plenty of sunny spells will lift temperatures between 6 and 8 degrees, so around average for the time of year. So that will feel less cold across central southern England compared to the week so far. Into the evening time, generally stays dry for much of the UK. However, a few showers moving in off the North Sea could push their way inland as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies holding on across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some mist and fog developing here as temperatures drop below freezing, leading to a widespread frost. Across England and Wales, less cold, temperatures close to freezing, so a patchy frost to greet us into Friday morning. So dry start for many Friday morning, sunny spells across England and Wales, clear skies across Northern Ireland and Scotland, though there will be some dense mist and fog patches around to greet us. These should burn away to leave a largely dry day. In fact, most of the UK will see a dry day until later on when thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain, brisk winds move into the northwest. Here, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius. Elsewhere, still around average between 6 and 8 degrees. Over the next few days, it stays largely dry. We could see some weather fronts at times across the north and the west through the weekend, giving a little bit of light rain, but overall temperatures generally around average for the time of year. I'll see you again soon.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, the West unites behind Britain in sending tanks to Ukraine as Russia warns of a new level of confrontation.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 26th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Western countries united behind the UK last night as Germany and the United States agreed to send dozens of tanks to Ukraine. In a late-night address, President Zelensky called it an historic day.
A new GB News People's poll suggests the Conservatives are lagging behind Labour when it comes to who you trust to run the economy. We'll be breaking down the figures.
And GB News can exclusively reveal plainclothes members of the military are patrolling the Kent coast to intercept small migrant boats that make it past Border Force patrols. We're going to get the latest from our Home and Security Editor.
And we're finding out how the British Bobsleigh team made history with the help of a Marine, a former pilot and an ex-rugby player. We'll be speaking to one of the country's latest gold medal winners.
Don't forget you can get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
Yes, lots of you getting in touch this morning, so do keep them coming in. Lots of you talking about Channel migrants. That's after that latest exclusive package there from Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. Duncan says, why don't we just cut out the middlemen and send our military to collect anyone who wants to come here? I presume the military are there to help those gain legitimate entry and not stop them.
And my namesake Andrew says a good idea might be to put illegal immigrants into our forces accommodation and our service personnel in four-star hotels. I've not heard that idea before, rather good.
Annette says a safe route for asylum seekers is readily available. Buying a ticket and fly or get a train into the UK, then claim asylum at passport control.
And John says the one thing the government could do is to stop any benefits being allowed for social housing or accommodation. If you send this message out, you won't get any public help. They'll soon stop coming.
And we've also got lots of people getting in touch on the People's poll. Dee said, one viewer has said, anyone who doesn't vote can't complain about what the government does. Well, the last election, I voted for a party that was going to take control of our borders, get Brexit done, and let me just say they've done neither. So I won't be voting for anyone next time, as clearly it makes no difference. Well, do keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We do love to hear from you. Now to our top story, and Germany and the US have followed Britain's lead in committing to send tanks to Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Zelensky hailed it as an historic day. It follows weeks of intense international pressure on Berlin to finally commit to that move.
Well, last night, on a call with the leaders of the US, Germany, France and Italy, Rishi Sunak urged Western countries to give more support to Ukraine and push for an end to the war.
Earlier we were joined in the studio by the Evening Standard defence editor Robert Fox, who welcomed the intervention by the West.
I don't think, it's awful rolling my eyes, I don't think they were taking the war in Ukraine seriously enough. It's still on a knife edge. It still could go one way or the other in a total collapse. Look at the pressure that the Ukrainian population, as well as their forces, are under. And I think that they have been mesmerised since the Cold War by Russian bluster and propaganda, at which the Russians are extremely good, it must be said. We're hearing yet again, we've heard it in this studio, oh, this is an escalation. Well, it's escalation or bust. That's the argument that clinched it this time. If we don't do this, the whole thing could go down the Swanee, or up the Swanee, I never know which one it is, within a matter of months.
And what of the risk, Robert, of an escalation? Because the real fear of an escalation is that it becomes a conflict between NATO and Russia, which effectively then is World War III.
You will have nuclear blackmail. And
is that going to come from Russia?
No. You've got the nuclear blackmail already.
Yeah.
It's hidden in plain sight. Isn't it fascinating that the nuclear blackmail is the Zaporizhia nuclear complex, which could go off. You could have another Chernobyl and much, much worse with a total meltdown. The Russians have been completely irresponsible.
That was Robert Fox there, the defence editor for the Evening Standard. Now it's just gone 5 minutes past 8. It's time now for the People's Poll. And let's take a look at what the poll is saying this week.
Well, it's pretty bleak for the Conservatives. They're lagging way behind on the economy. Only 16% of people saying a Tory government will better manage the UK's finances. Double that believe Labour would do a better job.
When asked about who they would vote for in the next general election, 50% said Labour, just 21% said Conservative.
And on levelling up, which is, of course, the government's great mantra, 6 in 10 in the poll say they'd have no confidence at all the government's going to deliver on that promise.
When asked about their thoughts on Rishi Sunak, 23% said they were either very favourable or favourable to the Prime Minister, while 48% said they felt somewhat or very unfavourable towards him.
Well, joining us now is the academic and Professor of Politics, Matt Goodwin. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Andrew.
Absolutely no cheer in there for the Conservatives whatsoever. Labour on 50%, Tories on 21%, but really worrying for the Tories. Their traditional support as the best party to run the economy, it's disintegrated.
Well, you're bang on the money. These are really bleak numbers for the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak. It's not just that they are behind Labour on the economy. Remember, that is the most important issue facing all voters and indeed the country. But they are also now really not connecting on their other flagship policies like levelling up. We find that only 1% of the country are completely confident the government will level up the country. 60% say they're not confident at all, Andrew. And then when you look at Rishi Sunak's own ratings, those are going backwards. They're getting worse. So look, we are really still looking at a Conservative Party that is heading for a complete wipeout and a Labour Party that really does look like it is now actually commanding a very strong position in the opinion polls. A long way to go, but not comfortable reading for Mr. Sunak.
I'm going to bring in now journalist and columnist Carol Malone, who joins us in the studio now. So not looking good for Rishi Sunak, according to this poll. And alarm bells are going to be ringing for the Conservatives, aren't they?
What I'm amazed at with this poll is that as how people, 30% of people think Starmer would be better on the economy. I think if you went into the street and you did a straw poll and you said to people, name me two policies, two of Starmer's financial policies, no one would be able to say anything. No one would be able to give you one because the guy changes his mind every 5 minutes. I also think it's pretty naive of people to think that the economy could be in good shape, bearing in mind we've just come through a 2-year pandemic, bearing in mind we have a 2.5 trillion debt because of that. We've had, roaring inflation, roaring interest rates, and that's worldwide. That's not the Tories' fault. That's actually worldwide. So I don't know why people would think the economy under the Tories or under anyone would be in good shape. But I'm amazed they think it would be in better shape under Starmer,
I guess it's because people are feeling so taxed, Carol. We're the most taxed we've been in 70-odd years.
Well, but that's something the Tories have done. But I mean, all the rest of it is not. And have people forgotten that Starmer is the man who, was instrumental. He bust every sinew to get the hard left, anti-American, anti-capitalist Corbyn into the top job. People have forgotten that. And I don't know about you, but I'm just kind of reading the papers of late. Labour has a big problem, I think. It has a big... Its problem used to be anti-Semitism. The problem I now think it's anti-women. It's a party that looks like it doesn't like women. We had 3 Labour MPs last week sharing a stage with Sarah Jane Baker, a trans activist who was jailed for 30 years for attempted murder, kidnap, torture, whatever. And they're sharing a stage with someone like that. And opposing women's rights and heckling their own members of their own party in the Commons who dare to stand up for women's rights. So I don't know how people can look at the Labour Party and think it's ready to govern. I really don't think it is.
Matt, Matt Goodwin still with us? Matt, is this about... I think Carol's right, Carol Malone's right. There's no great passion for Keir Starmer and his policies. This is more, isn't it, about the fact people are fed up with the Tories. They've been in power for 12, 13 years. We're taxed to hell. They haven't delivered on Brexit, even though they said they would. Yeah. And they look across the channel, and day in, day out, hundreds of people are crossing, and the government seem impotent to do anything about it.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, Andrew. As the old saying goes, oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. And the Conservative government seems to be falling over itself to give voters a reason not to vote Conservative at the next election. It is the accumulation of these crises, as you point to, not just the borders, but also we've got low rates of growth, high taxation, a collapse in living standards, and so on and so on and so on, including, by the way, the NHS, which is about to take over the economy as the most important issue for voters. They are utterly exasperated with a institution that we're giving £200 billion to every year, but which is just not performing and not functioning as it should. And this is like the 1990s. For some viewers who will remember the 1990s, they will probably be thinking about that period between 1995 and 1997, where the Conservatives were embroiled in sleaze, where Labour took a commanding lead on public services. And the Conservatives just didn't really seem to have a story or a narrative to give the country about what they wanted to do with the country. They sort of ran out of momentum. And I think many people will be drawing a comparison to that period and today. So the clock is ticking for Rishi Sunak. The rumours of a spring 24 election, I think really bring this into focus. We've got, a little over a year, not much time at all for the team in number 10 to try and do something here just to shake these numbers up.
Matt, I'll just say, what can they do? What can he do? Because if you look at Rishi Sunak's own personal poll ratings, they're pretty low too. And yet he was supposed to come in, stabilise. He was meant to be very media-friendly, telegenic. I think he's been pretty hopeless in some of his media performances.
Yeah, I mean, the problem for Sunak is he was a known quantity, right? People knew him through furlough and the pandemic. So it was hard for him to get that big initial honeymoon bounce. So what does he want to do? What's he going to try and do? Well, he's told us, Andrew, he said he's going to bring down inflation. He's going to bring down the cost of energy. He's going to bring down the numbers of small boats crossing the channel. And he's going to say to the country at the next election, judge me according to whether I've done all of those things. He is going to be lucky, I think, in some respects. Inflation is coming down already. We can see that. The cost of energy is going to be lower than most of the forecasts last year anticipated. And he can now already point to the bespoke route for Albanian migrants going back to Albania. So he's going to have stuff to talk about. Whether it's enough stuff, given the magnitude of the crisis that we're facing in the country, I think remains the open question.
Matt Goodwin, thank you so much. That's Matt Goodwin there, the academic and professor of politics, reacting to our People's Poll. And we still have Carol Malone in the studio with us. I wanted to ask you about the migrant crisis, because that was another question that was in this People's Poll, wasn't it? And this surprised me. Fewer people believe the British government have lost control of the country's borders. So more people then believe that we do have more control. What do you think that's...
It's another aspect of the poll I really don't get. I think we've entirely lost control of our borders. Last year, 504,000 net immigration, 45,000 on boats. We see Sunak. Sunak talks a good game, as does Suella Braverman. I wanted to do better, but she's not doing it really. But, they talk a good game. But all I can say that Sunak has done so far, through a few million at the French, and hope that that's going to solve the problem, it's not. And I think this issue, more than the economy is going to do for the Tories.
Because that's what I think. And you're from the north of England, Carol. The Red Wall is which Boris Johnson's Tories swept all in front. If they don't get this fixed, I'm told by Red Wall Tory MPs, it's what they talk about on the doorstep all the time.
This matters to people more than anything else. Because, I think, the British people were a really fair nation with immigrants and refugees, and we always have been. And I think what they feel now is that the government is letting people take the mickey out of us. Why are we letting Albanians in? They shouldn't even be being processed because they're from a safe country. So why? So there are no deterrents. There's no deterrent in place to stop anyone coming.
But there was that flight, wasn't there, of Albanian migrants back to Albania. media? Do you think it's those kind of actions that has helped people feel like at least something is being done?
You're right, Ellie, but, every time that we get a plane on a tarmac, there's probably 80 people on it to start with, and then 75 of them get pulled off.
Human rights.
Yeah, and there's a story in the papers today saying that it's the French asking the British to stop the charities facilitating the crossings. The charities are working in total opposition. So, I think this issue above all else is going to do for the Tories, and I don't understand why. You know what I think it is? It's maybe before Christmas the papers were covering it every day. There were front page stories every single day. That's kind of quieting down a bit now. Yes, we have stories on the inside pages.
We've had bad weather, so not so
many.
We've
had bad weather, but you had a report this morning that said 4 boats came across yesterday, and I'm listening to your guy saying all these dinghies are being manufactured in China, and I'm thinking, oh my God, if people are hearing that, it'd be interesting to see what they think now if you did the poll.
And with the small boats, we've got Mark White had a very great story and plainclothes military patrolling the beaches in Dover. Get them in France to stop them getting on the channel.
We've all seen those pictures. I mean, I'm laughing and it's really not funny. And it's French cops having a fag while the guys are carrying the dinghy straight past them to get into the sea. And I'm thinking, and there was one story I read where they said that a French copper just punctured a dinghy with some kind of
end.
And I'm thinking, why don't they do that to them all?
I know.
Just puncture them, and they can't get across then. But I think this issue is really important. I mean, everyone is expecting. We know the economy is bad. We know we're skint. We know we can't pay the bills. But this, I think, people feel that it's really taking money away from us that we don't have.
And this will matter, won't it, in an election?
Oh, my God,
yes. It's something that matters to people.
Can I just say, you're talking about Sunak, Boris this weekend and this week looks like he's still Prime Minister. Where is Sunak?
Took the lead on tanks, and yet it was Rishi Sunak who sent tanks in first.
Yes.
But it's Boris who's getting the credit for what's happened in the last 2 days.
It was Boris who said at the weekend, what the hell are we waiting for? Why is the Sunak saying that to Biden?
Carol Malone, thank you really so much for your company.
She's always fabulous.
You too,
Very good. Thank you very much, Carol. Now, GB News can exclusively reveal, as we were just speaking about, that plainclothes members of the military have been patrolling some of Kent's beaches on the lookout for small migrant boats that managed to make it past Border Force and Royal Navy patrols in the Channel.
So military-routed inflators have been patrolling the coastline as UK authorities are stepping up their efforts, they say, to tackle the small boat crisis.
Well, it comes as almost 500 migrants were taken to Dover on Wednesday after taking advantage of a break in the weather to make the crossing. Hundreds more attempted to cross but failed to make it to UK waters. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this report.
Just before first light, the Border Force vessel Volunteer slipped into Dover Harbour. On board, around 100 people taken off 2 small migrant boats. During weeks of winter storms, there have been few in the way of weather windows where conditions are calm enough to allow small boats to cross. But the criminal gangs are patient, and after operating for the past 4 years, they're now expert at reading the wind and the tides. So on the few occasions the weather allows, the people smugglers launched their small boats en masse. By mid-morning, around 300 Channel migrants had been taken to Kent after they were picked up from half a dozen inflatables. The Prime Minister has vowed to make tackling the small boats crisis a top priority. The bad weather of late, meaning relatively low numbers arriving here, has certainly eased the pressure on the government. But as this latest surge shows, the moment weather conditions improve, the boats are back. As we filmed, military personnel left Dover Harbour in 2 rigid inflatables to patrol some of Kent's beaches, looking for any small boats that might have made it past the Border Force and Navy vessels out in the Channel. GB News has been told that other members of the military are now routinely patrolling some beaches on foot as well. Into the afternoon, the boats kept coming, just before the weather window closed again, with windy conditions now expected until the weekend. In just a matter of days, Border Force will once again take control of Channel migrant operations from the military, who've been coordinating these patrols since last April. But the pressure on the government is unlikely to ease just because the authorities are better at spotting and intercepting small boats. Stopping the trade in Channel migrants is the ultimate goal, but even the government admits that won't be a quick or simple job.
Well, Mark White joins us now. Mark, great story, and it's fascinating that plainclothes military are on the beaches, but I know that people are going to be shouting at the TV saying, put them on the beaches in France. Could they do that, or would that not be allowed under international law?
Well, they are on the beaches of France, not military personnel, but border force personnel, but in very small numbers. Let's not talk it up to be anything more than what it actually is, which is a few border force liaison officers on the other side of the channel. However, the National Crime Agency is working more effectively with its law enforcement partners on the continent with a view to trying to disrupt the criminal gangs, but that is not a new and an easy process. In fact, we've got some breaking news for you from the Labour Party, actually, some analysis that they have just released of the figures that they estimate for the money that these criminal gangs have made last year. So we're talking between £3,000 and £5,000 per migrant per head on these small boats, so an average of about £4,000 for each person on a boat. Labour estimate that netted the criminal gangs £183 million last night in the trade in those they're sending across the English Channel. And Labour, as part of this news release that they just put out with that analysis, are also saying that if they got in, one of the things that they would do immediately is to boost the National Crime Agency presence on the continent. They want an extra 100 agents out there working with their law enforcement partners in France and other countries to try to disrupt those involved in this lucrative trade. As I was mentioning in the last hour, they've had 4 years now to get a very sophisticated system of operating in place where they get these boats made to manufactured in China. They're sent then to Turkey, onwards to Europe and France, before, of course, the migrants are put in them and they try to cross on the good days here to the UK.
All right, that's Mark White, who's our Home and Security Editor, talking to us from Dover. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah. And what shocking figures.
Terrible. And the thing is, they've been banging on about the crime gangs ever since it started. Mark's talking 4 years. They know who they are. So why don't they round them up, arrest them and bang them up?
Yeah, but this network, as Mark was saying, is very, very sophisticated and very lucrative too. So £3,000 to £5,000 per migrant, these gangs are charging, made £183 million last year.
Makes me think a lot
See
of
why
those,
they keep doing it.
And also it makes me think more and more that a lot of those are economic migrants if they've got that sort of money.
OK, well, let us know what you think. We know lots of you would want to get in touch about that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to Scotland now because education staff from the largest teaching union there are continuing their 16-day strike action in an increasingly entrenched dispute over pay.
Joining us now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Good morning. Both the EIS union and the Scottish Government seem to be digging in. Where's it going from here?
Good morning. Yes, it seems to be we're halfway through these strikes now. Day 9 we're on of the 16 days of rolling strikes. And, you know, not much movement from the Scottish Government. We know that other things other than the 10% are on the table. But as I was reading earlier, it's been 65 days since that last pay offer was made from the Scottish Government in COSLA. And actually 352 days since teachers put their pay proposals to the government. I'm joined now by James Halfpenny, who's EIS Secretary for this region. James, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
So tell me, what is the mood like just now among members?
The mood is very, very solid in relation to this strike, but I have to say the last thing we want to be doing at this time is going on strike. But when you consider that we have lost in value 20% of our salary over the last 10, 15 years, and we're being offered 5% at a time when inflation is running at over 12%, you can understand the anger of teachers and the turnout that we have this morning at this school and at schools all over the country. This is a very, very solid strike at the present time.
You know, I must say it's a very good atmosphere in the picket line among the teachers. We have tambourines, we have some bongos, we have some four-legged friends, and we even have some family members. But tell me what, and it's certainly the local public is in good support as well. But very quickly, can you tell me about some of the terms of service, you know, that are being discussed about at the minute?
There are no terms of service. It's purely to do with salary at the present time. But one of the other factors that has to be taken into account is that teachers in general throughout the country again work many unpaid hours every week, every year, and as a consequence that's what holds the education system together.
Thank you very much, James. Well, back to you in the studio. These strikes are certainly ongoing.
They're certainly ongoing, and they're quite loud behind you as well. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Really good to get that from you, Toby.
And after the break, I'm excited about this. We're going to meet a member of the Bobsleigh team that won Britain's first ever gold at the European Championships.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. Just coming up to 8:30, and we are speeding into the bobsleigh this morning. Great news, because Britain has won its first ever bobsleigh gold medal at the European Championships with victory in the 4-man event in Germany.
Brad Hall, Aaron Gulliver, Greg Kakic and Taylor Lawrence, they're the ones. They clocked a time of 1 minute 49.3 seconds across their 2 runs. Their time was 900ths of a second quicker than the German team. I'm so glad they won.
Yes, me too. I'm so glad they won. And they look so happy to have won as well. If you are listening on radio, just lots of very happy faces, you can imagine. And we can speak to one of the winners now, Brad Hall, who is on the line for us. And Paul Coit is in the studio with us as well, who's going to react to this. But let's start with you, Brad. So, Brad, how did it feel to pick up gold? It must be the most amazing moment.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. What makes it even more incredible was winning it on a German track, which is pretty much dominated by them for the last 17 years. So not another person apart from Germany had won there. So and to be the first in Great Britain to ever win a gold medal in the European Championships is a phenomenal feeling.
Where does a British bobsleigh team practice?
So we have a training base in Bath, at the University of Bath, but this is literally just to practice the push start, which we do all over the summer. So there's nowhere in the world that you can practice actually on the ice to do the driving. So it's all about the physical training during the summer, and then we head away during the winter months from about October till March in Europe and North America.
Brad, we should make a point. Sorry, the thing is with funding. See, we look at the Germans, and the Germans are so dominant, aren't they, when it comes to the bobsleigh? They've got the money behind them, but you've had to pretty much raise loads of money yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. So we lost our funding in 2019 when we didn't win a medal at the World Championships. We finished 4th. So the last 3 years after that, I've had to raise the money for my own team, do all the organisational structure, recruit athletes, do the testing and absolutely everything up until the 2022 Olympics. And then after that, this year we've actually got our UK sport funding back, which has helped us immensely. It's taken a lot of pressure off myself, so I don't have to worry about all the organisational stuff, and I can just focus on being the best athlete I can be. And we've reaped the rewards of that and come away with a lot of medals this season.
It's been brilliant, but the thing is, what I really want to know, and I love watching the bobsleigh, is how do you make it so successful? Is it down to the power? Because I know you've got to get the good start. Is it down to the actual bob itself? Is it down to you piloting it and knowing the course? So what makes a successful bobsleigh run?
Yeah, so pretty much you've named the 3 fundamentals of the bobsleigh.
Oh, I've done it. That's it. It's fine. I've answered it for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've pretty much nailed it. So it's the start. The start is pretty key. It gives you a good start time and a good velocity into the track, and then it's up to me to jump in and drive it down as smoothly and quickly as possible. So, and then obviously the equipment that you have is pretty key to maintaining that speed as well. So they're the 3 parts, and obviously we're in control of the start and the driving, but the equipment is where like the Germans, they have a massive advantage because they put so much money into their research and development to get that advantage over us, and we're just using off-the-shelf bobsleighs and runners and things like that, so we've got no advantage there at the moment.
How fast do you go, and have you ever gone flying out of the bobsleigh?
Well, the fastest track is out in Whistler in Canada, so that is just shy of 100 miles an hour. So
my God,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So putting that in perspective is that you're going one direction at nearly 100 miles an hour, and then half a second later you're doing exactly the same speed in the other direction. So the amount of G-force that you're pulling around the corners is quite phenomenal. But I haven't actually come out of the bobsleigh before. I've had a few crashes, but I've always stayed inside.
What do you see as you're piloting it? Because surely all you see is a wall of white. I mean, you're aware, obviously, where each turn is, but what do you see in front of you?
Yeah, so before we go down the track every day, we do a track walk. So we walk up and then we analyse the curves and see what we want to do. So we've got a plan on our head before we go down. But sometimes you don't see much, like your head's bouncing off the side of the sled as you're going down if you're having a rough run, so your vision's quite impaired and the ice is not as smooth as you'd think. So there's a lot of vibration as well. So you're trying to use your your best wits when you're going down the track and trying to pick up as much information as possible. But it gets tough at times, but yeah, you get used to it the more you do it.
Have you got your medal on you? Your gold medal?
I do actually, yeah.
Look what I've just found there.
Let's have a look.
Let's have a look. Oh, love.
Nice,
it's see-through. Wonderful.
Yeah,
and what's it say
medal,
on there?
A little bit of gold trimming on there. So yeah.
And you're going to get a world championship. Are you going to get a world championship medal to add to that?
I very much hope so. So we're out in St Moritz at the moment, and we have the 2-man race this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, and then the 4-man's the following Saturday and Sunday as well.
Oh, well, best of luck. Best of luck.
Absolutely.
You're going to do us proud, I'm sure, as you already have done. Brad Hall, really good to speak to you.
I'm in awe of that. 100 miles an hour.
It's crazy. And you know how close their head is to the ice. If you, as it goes round, we're probably inches away.
Are they aimed this way or that way?
Well, the thing is, it's more side to side. You see, you've got to sway along with it.
One, is it,
because you've got Brad there at the front, and then you've got the brakeman, so obviously he's got an important job, and then the two in the middle, that's all about the power. So this is where me and Andrew would come in, is that would just run along, and then you can just hide in the middle, let the others do the work, and then...
Can I just say, you may be a frustrated bobslayer, Paul. I'm quite happy for others to do it, and I can watch.
Fine, OK.
It's very good to watch, and I'm glad you're here to explain how it actually works.
I wish them well at the weekend.
Thank you very much. Yes, and best of luck from all of us at GB News.
Yeah.
To the bobsleigh team, let's hope they get gold at the Wilds now. And now stay with us, because after the break, we'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Candice Holdsworth.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome back. The time is just coming up to 20 to 9. It's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is Deputy Editor at The Spectator, Freddie Gray, alongside writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both. Been great this morning, so we'll keep it coming.
Good morning.
Freddie, let's start with you, shall we, in The Guardian. And a discourse on sexuality.
Yes, this is a very Guardian story, and the way they presented it is very Guardian. A census suggests young people are most open about sexuality. This is a study that has found that data showing that 16 to 24-year-olds are more than twice as likely to identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual or other minority sexual orientation, LGBT+, than the overall population. And what I find is odd about this is that The Guardian seems to be blurring open about sexuality, implying tolerance, with the number of people who say they are gay, lesbian, bisexual or other minority sexual orientation. So much so that they're using this story to speculate that there is a lot of homophobia still in older generations because there are lower numbers of people who declare as such. So I think this is where you get into a very sort of muddling territory between, are we talking about tolerance here, or are we saying there has to be a sort of quota of gay people for us to think that we have a tolerant society?
Oh, I mean, I'm the generation I am. A lot of people my age just wouldn't come out. I came out when I was very young, and that was my choice.
Yeah.
I just thought it easier to live life without hiding stuff. But I mean, I support the right completely about some people not to declare what they are.
Yeah,
why should they have to?
It's not necessarily a sign of great societal homophobia.
Absolutely.
That people don't.
People can be private about it.
And the other
entitled to be.
And the other detail that is quite striking is the number. It's only 0.5 to 1%. Number of people in that age bracket, 16 to 24, who identify as trans has doubled.
Right.
So, I mean, we are telling, in a lot of schools, we are telling people that gender is a social construct. It's not that surprising that a lot of children are increasingly confused about their gender and are suffering from gender dysphoria. And I think we often say on the show, we've said it before, we spend a lot of time talking about trans issues, and a very small section of the population. But it is something that's growing because of the indoctrination, effectively, in a lot of schools.
Do you think we talk about it too much? We do almost obsess about it. A lot of people talk about it at Westminster too, not least with what's going on in Scotland with the bill where 16-year-olds can change their gender after 3 or 6 months without any reference to a GP.
Yes, I mean, it is. It's so true. It affects a very small proportion of the population, but it dominates public discourse. But I think, like Freddie says, but what the effect this is having on younger people is they're thinking about it more, and maybe they're being drawn to it more. So maybe they're choosing to identify as trans because it's something that they previously previous generations would never have heard about, but that they hear about a lot. So we have to think about the effect of this once marginal issue is now having on younger people.
Freddie, let's go to another one of your stories now, and we'll look in the Mail at AI could one day kill everyone. That's not what we want to read.
Yes, it's going to do to humans what we did to the dodo.
Oh, no.
According to this. And this story's been... AI is one of the sort of rumbling stories at the moment because there have been some pretty amazing advances in the last year and couple of years. Or we're seeing these major advances. A lot of chat about this chat robot that can effectively kill journalism by writing all the articles that we slave over.
Never.
It's not bad.
No,
it could never do an Andrew Pierce. We should try it. Have you tried it? Do an article in the style of Andrew Pierce.
No, I haven't.
Try it. It'll see what you think.
Oh, you should try that.
I will try that. Try TikTok as well. My word, my world's changing.
That could be on TikTok.
But yes, I mean, this is some professors who have warned MPs that we need to. Everybody knows every sci-fi movie ever has said that once the robots get sufficiently intelligent, they will destroy us. They're saying this is actually something we need to start worrying about now rather than later.
Because it is just gathering momentum so fast. I mean, I was on at the weekend and Andrew Eamonn was on talking about AI in Japan, and they've got robots that can basically, similar to what you're talking about with Andrew Pierce's columns, is it can replicate a loved one who's died, who's passed on, and you can have a conversation with them. And it's really quite eerie, but there is that moral and ethical issue, isn't there, of when the robots get that intelligent, they can ultimately, what's the need for human beings?
Well, quite, and all the programming is to try and induce empathy in them, so they could be, can have robot carers in the future and so on. But the flip side of empathy is cruelty, and so we don't want to teach them that.
Are robots taking us over? Will they take us over?
I never used to think so, but then with the development of this ChatGPT, I thought, oh my goodness, I mean, writers, we never thought we could be replaced. I mean, they can't do what we can do to create meaning. But this has actually shown that there are huge possibilities for AI to start mimicking us in ways that could become quite sinister in later years. But I do think, though, that we should also look at the opportunities it presents, because there could be incredible opportunities for artificial intelligence in the future, such as performing surgery, remote surgery. These things are incredible. So obviously we have to manage what could be bad outcomes, but I do want to be careful about just shrouding it in the language of fear.
A bad outcome is definitely writing our articles.
Yes.
Did you see that ChatGPT has predicted that this weekend, I think it's this weekend's football match between Arsenal and Man City, they've written a match report about a future match, saying that it will be 2-1, this is what will happen.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
So it'll be interesting to see how accurate it is on Sunday.
Yes, their predictive capabilities.
Candice, let's go back to the trans issue, shall we now? And this is a story that's absolutely dominated some of the papers and social media this week. It's of a transgender rapist who's in a women's prison in Scotland. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so this is front page of the Telegraph, and it's the case of Isla Bryson, who is a prisoner who's currently being held in a women's prison after being convicted of rape, I think in 2020. And it was at that time that he began to identify as a woman. And people are saying this is representing such a safeguarding issue for women in jail, because he has a history of sexual violence. It may be, some have raised questions about the veracity of his claims to be transgender. How is it that biological males who have used their physical appendages to abuse women are being held with vulnerable women in women's prisons? And even one of Nicola Sturgeon's own members of the Scottish Parliament has raised concerns about this. And I think this is starting to come to the fore now, this issue. It was previously a concern of feminist campaigners, but the public are starting to learn about it.
And this man who's now identifying as a woman, is a rapist. His ex-wife saying, he's conning you all.
Yes, yes.
In all the years she was with him, he never once mentioned he was a man in a woman's body, and this is just a con to have a cushier life in a woman's jail.
Yes.
Where I think women inmates are potentially at risk.
Yes, that was an extraordinary interview with his estranged wife.
Yeah.
He subjected her to terrible violence when they were married. She said he never once mentioned anything to do with gender or anxiety around his gender. She says she thinks he's using it to manipulate the system. And this is what a lot of people have said, that there are individuals who will do this, which is why also this new gender recognition bill, which would allow people to change their gender without any medical checks or verification, could represent a threat to women's safety.
And Nicola Sturgeon will be under pressure now to move this rapist out of a female jail.
Yes, and she's on the minority side of public opinion on this. I mean, the SNP, they discussed in this gender recognition bill, they discussed an exemption for in prisons, for safeguarding in prisons.
They rejected it.
And it was rejected, which is madness, because it's not just kind of right-wing dog whistle politics. This has happened every time this has been allowed in prisons. This has happened because rapists in jail are going to do whatever they want, whatever they can to commit heinous sexual acts. And we've seen it over and over again. And I think there's a reason Rishi Sunak picked this fight with Nicola Sturgeon. It's because she's on the wrong side of the argument as far as the public's concerned.
Interesting to see what the Labour Party does, because the Labour Party in Scotland are supporting this. And Keir Starmer said he thinks 16 is too young, but he still hasn't said whether the Labour Party will vote with the Tories to stop this happening.
Well, the Labour Party famously can't say what a woman is, so they are. Keir Starmer is trying to sound a little bit more sensible on this issue.
Can only a woman have a service? He said it's not a straightforward question. Yes, it is.
No, it's quite a straightforward
question, actually.
Yeah.
OK, have we got time for one more? Or... No, we've got to wrap, I'm afraid. Sorry, I was trying for you. Freddie, Candice, you've been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Thank you. Now, our next guest, very exciting, is the son of film royalty Geoffrey Jaffa Moore, whose dad is, of course, Roger Moore, and he's released a new single in honour of his father. It's called You and I, and it's from Jaffa's new album, Photograph. which is released tomorrow. So let's take a look at the music video.
Beginning of our time, we've crossed this land so blind. Our children are in despair, but do we really care?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, you may have recognised some famous faces in that video. A real array of stars there. We're joined now by Jaffa Moore himself. Good morning to you, Jaffa. And wow, what an extraordinary video. So much talent in there. A beautiful tribute, really, to your father, a legend.
Well, apart from myself, that everyone else is very talented. He unfortunately he didn't make it. He didn't see the finished product. But the good thing was that that the last day he was alive, I managed to film him, and so every time I see the video, I'm seeing Roger. It's really quite moving.
It must have been such a cathartic experience to make this music and to think of your father. How did you find that process?
You know, it's a tricky question, because it's just a bit like, you know, being the son of an actor, a famous actor. You know, he was a very down to earth guy. Took his career, you know, with a pinch of salt, and said, "Look, I'm getting paid to basically make up stuff." And so, you know, the array of all these people. I mean, it was just, you know, guys coming back from work, Morecambe and Wise, all these, you know, Sean, Michael. They'd come back home and say hi to Roger. We'd have a lunch, and they were just sort of, you know, in the same industry. It was you know, so I don't really, you know, getting all these wonderful people. Really was to support the organization that he was so dedicated to, UNICEF. And so, you know, for me, the hardest part was the logistics of getting all these people together, which took quite some time.
Jaffa, growing up, the son of Roger Moore, one of our most famous actors, one of the most recognisable actors. I remember when I met him once, I was slightly weak at the knees because he was one of my great heroes, my favourite James Bond, for instance.
Sorry, could you ask that question?
Yeah, I said, what was it like growing up as the son of Roger Moore, one of the most famous faces in Britain, if not the world?
Well, I mean, you know, he's so down to earth that, yeah, we'd go out to a restaurant or go shopping, and always harassed. And so that was probably the you know, I'd sort of say things are quite different. But, you know, at home, he's just a very regular guy, and really, you know, in self-deprecating and sardonic with it all. So, yeah, at school I'd get, you know, a bit more attention, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and here we are now. You know, it's using that name for a good cause, and you better have something good to sell.
And people absolutely loved your father. I mean, they still do. Andrew was talking so beautifully about him earlier on, and what a wonderful man he was, and just so warm and friendly. What do you think, as his son, was so special and endearing about him? Because in that music video, we see the likes of Joanna Lumley alongside Paris Hilton. I mean, you'd never think you'd see those two sharing a screen, but there must be something about your father that brings these people together.
Well, as you said, I mean, you know, he was a really loved humanitarian. He always said, you know, it's so important to be nice to people when you're on your way up, because you are sure as hell going to meet them on the way down. And they all, I think, you know, I don't think if it weren't for Roger, I mean, the song is good enough, but for, you know, just because of who he was, I think all these people came together. It made it a lot easier to get them to appear.
Jaffa, just remind us, when is it coming out and what's it called?
27th of January, which I believe is tomorrow.
It is.
Is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's called Photograph. There we go, Jaffa Moore Photograph. And it's a tribute to the sort of 70s and 80s, which is the music I grew up with, where it was, you know, live instrumentation meets electronic. So it's a fusion of 70s and 80s, a bit of rock and a bit of electronic. Yeah, it's a mix. I hope you get to hear it.
Yes, we will certainly check it out. Thank you so much, Jaffa Moore, son of the late Roger Moore. Really good to have you on the programme this morning. What a wonderful music video, so much talent.
Joan Collins is involved, Stephen Fry, Liam Neeson, the list goes on and on and on.
I know, it's
amazing.
It's fun to watch the video, isn't it? Just spot all the people that you know and love.
Yeah, exactly. Love
Amazing.
them all.
Well, do stay with us. We've got lots more after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. Well, the day ahead is looking largely dry. We will see plenty of sunny spells, but that means we'll see a frost returning tonight. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure continues to dominate the weather pattern, keeping it largely dry and settled. Weather fronts will try and move into the far northwest of the UK later on Friday, bringing some thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain here by the end of the day. This morning, though, a dry start for many, a frosty start in places. Best of the sunshine across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into Wales too. Thicker cloud as we move through the day across some eastern areas, perhaps 1 or 2 light showers. The winds coming from the north, generally lighter than they were on Wednesday, but still brisk down the east coast at times. But plenty of sunny spells will lift temperatures between 6 and 8 degrees, so around average for the time of year. So that will feel less cold across central southern England compared to the week so far. Into the evening time, generally stays dry for much of the UK. However, a few showers moving in off the North Sea could push their way inland as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies holding on across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some mist and fog developing here as temperatures drop below freezing, leading to a widespread frost. Across England and Wales, less cold, temperatures close to freezing, so a patchy frost to greet us into Friday morning. So dry start for many Friday morning, sunny spells across England and Wales, clear skies across Northern Ireland and Scotland, though there will be some dense mist and fog patches around to greet us. These should burn away to leave a largely dry day. In fact, most of the UK will see a dry day until later on when thicker cloud, outbreaks of rain, brisk winds move into the northwest. Here, temperatures reaching 9 or 10 Celsius. Elsewhere, still around average between 6 and 8 degrees. Over the next few days, it stays largely dry. We could see some weather fronts at times across the north and the west through the weekend, giving a little bit of light rain, but overall temperatures generally around average for the time of year. I'll see you again soon.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The West unites behind Britain in sending tanks to Ukraine as Russia warns of a new level of confrontation.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 26th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Andrew Pearce. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
Western countries united behind the UK last night as Germany and the US agree to send dozens of tanks to Ukraine. In a late-night address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a historic day.
A new GB News poll, very bad news for the Tories. They're lagging even behind Labour when it comes to who you trust to run the economy. We're going to break down those figures for you.
And GB News can exclusively reveal that plainclothes members of the military are patrolling the Kent coast to intercept small migrant boats that make it past Border Force patrols. And do get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from. We've got loads of views from you. Keep them coming in. Yeah, got loads of views coming in. We're going to share some with you now.
I think we should.
Channel migrants, lots of you getting in touch on that. Margaret says, what a sorry state of affairs when the only control of our borders is the British weather.
I'm afraid that's true. And Stephen says, if these countries that people come from don't want to take them back, just refuse to send them aid like we do year after year.
Yep, and Leslie says, Britain has paid France a fortune. The deal was for you to stop these crossings and you haven't. Enough is enough.
And, of course, there's those news figures showing that the people smuggling gangs have made £183 million from small boat crossings in 1 year.
Yes, yes, and I think it's per head, per migrant, these criminal gangs are making £3,000 to £5,000. So it is lucrative, and as we were hearing from Mark White earlier, it's sophisticated as well. It's a very difficult model to break.
Sure.
Yeah, do keep those views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, to our top story now, and Germany and the US have followed Britain's lead in committing to sending tanks to Ukraine.
The President Zelensky of Ukraine hailed it as an historic day, and of course it follows weeks of intense national pressure on Berlin in particular to commit to the move.
Well, last night, on a call with the leaders of the US, Germany, France and Italy, Rishi Sunak urged Western countries to give more support to Ukraine and push for an end to the war.
We're joined now by the former Home Office Minister, Norman Baker. Norman, you were, of course, a hardliner on Ukraine. You thought we should have been going much further very early on. Just remind us what your position is.
Well, indeed, I think so, because I regard Vladimir Putin as something of a psychopath who only understands strength. People in his mindset see any attempt at compromise as weakness, and we had to deal with them very straight on, very early on. We're getting there now, I think, as the West. The Western response has been probably better, more coordinated and more firm than he would have imagined. I mean, let's go back to when the invasion took place. He thought he'd be in Kiev within a week, with Russian flags flying over all the major buildings and presenting a huge triumph for his people. It's all gone horribly wrong, and it proves the old adage, it's much easier to start a war than to finish it.
But did you not think at the time, and perhaps you still do, or maybe you've modified your position, that NATO should have attacked. There should have been conflict between NATO and Russia.
I never thought that. What I did think was that NATO should have been far firmer in supporting Ukraine in the early days and providing tanks and everything else right on. And the issue with tanks now, I mean, I welcome the fact we got tanks going there. I think that's exactly right. But they're going to take a while to get there. The American tank's going to take a year, I think, or more to get there. It's a long, long time. And equally, I'm not quite sure how soon the British and Polish and German tanks will get there, but clearly the Russians are gearing up for an offensive in the spring, and it'd be really quite useful if the Ukrainians were trained and had the tanks by that point.
But Putin has miscalculated the West, hasn't he? And he's also miscalculated the strength of the Ukrainians.
He has, that's right, Ellie, on both those points. I mean, the issue is what happens now in Moscow, because there's no democracy of West talking about in Russia. So the issue is he going to be removed by internal forces? And if he is, then the danger is we'll get someone even more right-wing and maniacal than Putin himself. So it's a difficult situation to be in.
How much should we be concerned about the Russian embassy in Berlin, for example, calling this a dangerous escalation, and Vladimir Solovov speaking yesterday saying the appearance of German tanks on a battlefield means that German military bases will now be targets?
I don't think that's true. I mean, I think if Russia actually attacked a NATO country, that would be extraordinary. I think these are words. These are hot words from Putin.
Well, it would effectively be almost World War III.
Yes, it would be if he attacked a NATO country, because under the NATO arrangement, all the other NATO countries would have to come in and support Germany.
They would.
I mean, I think the other issues with Poland and so on is the tanks presumably will come from Poland. They are going to be very vulnerable when they go to the countryside of Ukraine. I don't know whether they're going through individually or in convoy, but the Russians will clearly try and bomb them.
They need air cover. Don't they need air cover?
They do need air cover. And, of course, the other thing is that Zelensky, who's played a blinder in many ways and continually upped his requests to the West, which have been met in each occasion, he will now want fighter jets. That's the next thing he'll ask for.
Yeah, I think we should give them to him.
So do I.
Yeah, and many people are saying that's going to be the next step in this conflict. Well, stay with us, Norman, because next we're going to GB News' People's Poll, because the latest stats have been revealed.
And the Tories are way behind on the economy, with only 16% of people saying a Tory government will better manage the UK's finances. More than double that trust Labour more to do a better job. Astonishing.
Yes, when asked about who they would vote for in the next general election, 50% said Labour, just 21% said Conservative.
Levelling up, it's the government's great mantra, of course. 6 in 10 in the poll say they're not confident at all the government's ever going to deliver on that promise.
When asked about their thoughts on Rishi Sunak, 23% said they are either very favourable or favourable to the Prime Minister, while 48% said they felt somewhat or very unfavourable towards him.
Joining us now, we've got Norman Baker, of course, who's the former Lib Dem coalition minister, and GB News political reporter Olivia Utley's here. Olivia, the standout thing for me in that poll, it's not just that Labour's on 50 points, because they've been very high for a long time. The collapse in support for the Tories on the economy, which has traditionally been their strong point. They are the custodians of the economy. Can't trust Labour. They'll spend too much. They'll tax us too much, and all Labour governments ran out of money. That's all gone.
Absolutely. I would say that the two things that stood out to me are the economy and the fact that the Tories aren't trusted at all on keeping control of Britain's borders. 28% believe that the government has completely lost control of the borders. Now, those are two issues where you would expect the Conservatives to be doing well. And if you look at it from the other side, what's Labour's plan for the economy? Well, in the last few weeks, we've seen a slew of shadow cabinet ministers come out and explain their plans for their own portfolios. And there are some impressive and interesting ideas in there, but the problem with them was, the standout issue with them was that nothing was fully costed. Bridget Phillipson had a plan to give free childcare to all parents of children between age 0 and 11. I mean, that would be hugely expensive. The plan to change how the welfare system works would also be incredibly expensive. Labour hasn't explained how it's going to pay for it, and yet still Labour is well ahead on the economy. That is very, very bad news for Rishi Sunak. The Cabinet is meeting today. They're having an away day to talk about strategy for the general election. Apparently Isaac Levido, the election guru, is going to be there, saying that there is a narrow route for the Conservatives to get to victory at the next election. And he'll say that the Labour lead actually isn't as baked in as it might appear. Well, if the Conservatives are losing on these fronts that should, by rights, be theirs, there is a bit of a problem.
Well, it's a narrow lead indeed, at least if you go off the results of this poll. Just 21% of voting intention for Conservatives, 50% say they'd vote Labour if there were to be an election right now. I mean, Norman, is this a strong Labour or is this a weak Tory party now?
It's a weak Tory party, largely, and I think what you'll see when the election comes is people will vote for anyone but Tory in many seats, which will be Lib Dem in the south quite often, it'll be Labour in the north, it'll be SNP in Scotland. It's just an anti-Tory opinion poll, I think, coming through from GB News viewers and listeners. You know, but there's an old saying, an American saying, I've forgotten who it was, you might remember, Andrew, it's the economy stupid.
Yeah.
And if they can't win on the economy...
James Carville.
Thank you. I'm impressed that you know that. If they can't win on the economy, then they're toast. And whichever way they turn, if they don't have tax cuts, then people say they're not helping those who are vulnerable, and everybody's having a problem with the cost of living. If they do have tax cuts, and we have Liz Truss Mark II, with all the chaos in the markets, they're toast.
Is there a sense also, Norman, look, they've been in power since 2010, we're coming up to 13 years, it'll be 14 or 15 come the next election. People just get to the point where they think, enough.
They do.
Time for a change. This government is tired. They've run out of ideas. They're making lots of mistakes. And there's a bit of sleaze coming back again.
Oh, there's a lot of sleaze coming back. I mean, if you look at the timescale, I think it's interesting to think that the Tory government went from 1951 to 1964. That was 13 years. It then went from 1979 to 1997, 18 years with Margaret Thatcher. And then they got hammered in the 1997 election. There is a point at which people get fed up with the same party, but also parties just exhaust themselves. They run out of people. The people in the government have all been sacked or blotted a copybook or whatever they've done, and you end up at the end of a government for a long time. I saw this with Labour in 2009, with a whole lot of really second-rate ministers, because that's all that was left, and that's where we are now. You know, some good people around. I think Mark Harper and Hugh Merriman at the DFT are quite good. I deal with them with my transport hat on. But you look around government, you think, who are these ministers that we should look up to? I mean, where are they?
Where are the political titans?
Where are they? They're not. You know, where are the Heseltines of this world? They're nowhere around.
What do you make of that, Olivia?
Yeah, I think another issue is that there is no sort of plan for growth from the Conservative Party.
No.
So as Norman says, we don't have the big beast, but we also don't have a sort of coherent policy set forward. And of course, Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss were pilloried for their plan, which seemed to be going too fast, too much too soon for the markets anyway. But then Rishi Sunak came in, and in Jeremy Hunt's first budget, anything that was about growth was all about top-down growth. It was about the government investing in certain areas, which is all very well. But if you're going to vote Conservative, the traditional reason is that you want to feel empowered to invest in your business, to invest in, to have your own sort of personal growth and to, you know, be allowed to be encouraged to make more money for your family, really. And without that sort of Conservative plan for growth there, it does feel increasingly unlikely that people will find a positive reason to go out and vote Conservatives. And that's before you even factor in all the sleaze scandals, all the reasons not to vote Conservative.
And Jeremy Hunt's making a big speech this week, the Chancellor, talking about growth. And yet, I think it's either this week or next week, they're putting up corporation tax by 6%. How does that help growth?
Well, it doesn't particularly, but I mean, they're between a rock and a hard place. The public finances are in a terrible state. They actually need to raise some money. The borrowing limit's gone through the roof. But anything they do is going to be criticised as being depressing in terms of people's income. So, you know, whichever way they turn, they're really in a difficult situation.
Well, Norman, Olivia, stay with us because we want your reaction to this next story, because GB News can exclusively reveal that plainclothes members of the military have been patrolling some of Kent's beaches on the lookout for small migrant boats that managed to make it past Border Force and Royal Navy patrols in the Channel.
Military rigid inflators have also been patrolling the coastline as British authorities step up their efforts to tackle the ongoing small boats crisis.
Well, it comes as almost 500 migrants were taken to Dover on Wednesday after taking advantage of a break in the weather to make the crossing. Hundreds more attempted to cross but failed to make it into UK waters. Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White has this report.
Just before first light, the Border Force vessel Volunteer slipped into Dover Harbour. On board, around 100 people taken off two small migrant boats. During weeks of winter storms, there have been few in the way of weather windows where conditions are calm enough to allow small boats to cross. But the criminal gangs are patient, and after operating for the past 4 years, They're now expert at reading the wind and the tides. So on the few occasions the weather allows, the people smugglers launch their small boats en masse. By mid-morning, around 300 Channel migrants had been taken to Kent after they were picked up from half a dozen inflatables. The Prime Minister has vowed to make tackling the small boats crisis a top priority. The bad weather of late, meaning relatively low numbers arriving here, has certainly eased the pressure on the government. But as this latest surge shows, the moment weather conditions improve, the boats are back. As we filmed, military personnel left Dover Harbour in 2 rigid inflatables to patrol some of Kent's beaches, looking for any small boats that might have made it past the Border Force and Navy vessels out in the Channel. GB News has been told that other members of the military are now routinely patrolling some beaches on foot as well. Into the afternoon, the boats kept coming, just before the weather window closed again, with windy conditions now expected until the weekend. In just a matter of days, Border Force will once again take control of Channel migrant operations from the military, who've been coordinating these patrols since last April. But the pressure on the government is unlikely to ease just because the authorities are better at spotting and intercepting small boats. Stopping the trade in Channel migrants is the ultimate goal, but even the government admits that won't be a quick or simple job.
That's Mark White with that report there. We're still joined by Norman Baker, who's with us in the studio. Your reaction to that report from Mark White?
Well, look, I mean, we can find extra people coming across the Channel by having inflatable boats, but the fact is they're all still here and they're all still processed. So in a way, I mean, it doesn't matter very much. All they're doing really is funneling them through the process and through the system. One thing I would say about the Channel, which is worth pointing out, is that the reason there's some people coming off the Channel is partly because we've been successful as a country in stopping people coming on lorries and Eurostar through Dover. So I think in order to get a full picture of what's happening, we ought to probably compare the number of people who are coming through the Channel, as it were, and the Channel together and see how that marries with the past. But of course, what happened in the past was that we didn't know who was coming through because they were slipping into the country.
But I can't believe 45,000 a year were coming in on the back of lorries, Norman.
Well, I don't know how many were coming back of lorries, but what I do know is that, for example, at Newhaven, which used to be my constituency, there was a sign up at Newhaven Port saying, with a phone, saying, if you come without authority, use this phone to report yourself, which is hardly going to be very effective. And then when one of them did actually report themselves, they said, there's nobody here, we'll give you money to get on a train, go to Luna House in Croydon. Well, they never turned up. So it has been pretty slack for many years.
There's been a big fuss near you in I think it was Brighton or Hove, with some of those young child refugees who've been pinched or kidnapped or smuggled from a hotel. Why are any of these refugees in a hotel? Why don't they put them in, as they keep talking about, former holiday camps, secure areas?
Well, they should be in secure areas, but they should be in humane, secure areas. What was happening before, back in my day in the Home Office, was they were being treated effectively as prisoners, and that was horrendous for those children. Now they've gone the other extreme, being put in hotels. And you're right, actually, what they should be in is a secure environment, but a humane one, because a lot of these kids are really quite young.
It is very concerning.
And of course, they're now being captured and taken away for sexual exploitation in many cases.
We dread to think, don't you? Norman Baker, thank you very much. And you're staying with us. You're going to be with us after the break. We're going to be getting all of Norman's takes on the other big stories of the day after this short break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already depressed.
Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back and thanks for your company. We're still here with Norma Baker. We're going through all of the big stories of the day. We have to touch upon Nadeem Zahawi and his tax affairs.
We do.
It's not going away. He is still clinging on. And what I'm confused about is in PMQs, Rishi Sunak said that he wasn't aware of the full facts surrounding Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs. Now, I was under the impression that if you lie to the Prime Minister, you are sacked, but that doesn't appear to have happened.
Well, you either lie directly or you lie by omission, by creating a false impression by not giving the full facts. And I remember under Theresa May's premiership, I've forgotten which one it was, it might be Priti Patel, but someone was actually sacked for telling a lie to Theresa May.
I think it was Damien Green.
Well, I'm not sure it was Damien Green, but anyway, point is that Theresa May, as Prime Minister, took a view that was, Ellie, exactly as you say, that if they lie, they need to be sacked. Rishi Sunak has both kept the Tory sleaze story going and presented himself as weak in the process, and it's not going away. There was a great question yesterday from one of the SNP MPs, which also tied in the cost of living, which said, how do you recommend we should look after our family fortunes? Is it by getting advice on an £800,000 loan from a BBC chairman, said Boris Johnson?
Yeah.
Is it by being careless with your tax and avoiding tax? Or is it by becoming a non-dom? And this kind of sleaze cloud is now hanging over the Tories, as it did over John Major's government towards the end.
It was hugely damaging for John Major's government in the end, because actually the economy was booming towards the end of Major's premiership, and the Tories gave a very golden economy to Labour. But the sleaze stories, every week somebody else was resigning or there was a scandal.
Yeah, there's a scandal upon scandal. We got Boris Johnson's committee investigation coming back very shortly. There's been a whole succession of MPs going on sexual scandals throughout the Tory last couple of years. It really is, it looks pretty unedifying, to be honest with you.
To defend the Prime Minister, what he's saying is he set up, there is an ethics investigation with a proper ethics advisor to the Cabinet. He should be, the person who's doing that investigation should be allowed to do that, and then due process takes place, natural justice. But it seems to be we didn't need that, because we know that Zahawi told the Prime Minister about his tactic, didn't tell him he'd been fined.
Yeah, congratulations to Rishi for establishing an ethics advisor, because Boris Johnson lost two resigned, and he didn't have a third. He didn't carry on without one. So it's right that there should be one. But in this particular case, as you say, the facts are all known. Including the fact that Nadeem Zahawi was intimidating journalists to try and stop them running the story. That's all known.
Yeah.
Another story that we are looking at today is the front page of The Times, slightly different from The Times today. Laughing gas ban to tackle bad behaviour.
Yes, which takes precedence over US and Germany sending tanks to Ukraine.
Very odd, that.
I mean, it's an odd story, and I have to say it's an odd thing for the Home Office to be concentrating on. There's lots of other things you should be dealing with, not least of all the absence of police in our streets.
Yeah, quite.
Laughing gas ban. Look, I mean, I looked at this 10 years ago when I was a drugs minister in the Home Office, and I concluded it was disproportionate to go down this particular route. And actually, if they're worried about antisocial behaviour, which appears to be the reason for this examination, I have to say, the main drug associated with antisocial behaviour is alcohol.
Yeah, and they're not going to ban that.
They're not going to ban that at all.
And apparently you can buy this laughing gas if you're a chef, because you use it in whipped cream.
Yes, well, most people didn't know that.
I didn't know that. So now that's going to give a lot of people a way to buy it.
A whole lot of people with white hats on going to shops to buy it today.
Do many people take laughing gas?
I think some young people do. But the other thing is, does it actually cause that much damage? You know, we're in society, you cannot stop everybody doing anything they want to do. You cannot eliminate risk, you cannot eliminate behaviour. And I don't like the state being so controlling on individuals in the way that this government appears to want to do.
I know, and I just agree with you. Let's have some more bobbies on the beat, please, Home Office, and stop worrying about laughing gas.
Perhaps root out the rogue officers as well. Norman Bacon, really good to have your company with us the last half an hour. Thank you very, very much. We're going to end with a few of your thoughts. Roger says on the People's Poll, point taken. If you do not vote, then you have no right to complain. And Julie says Tories have not had one decent leader to get things done. I, for one, cannot vote for them after years being a supporter. Well, Stephen will be back tomorrow from 6 a.m, but coming up next is Tom Harwood with The Briefing. Thanks for your company.
Thank you.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up